All right, 47. Okay. Well, to those of you that I've met before, you can probably tell because I shout very loudly and get excited when I see people that I know. And I think it might be a medical condition. And to those that I haven't met yet, it's great to see you. I hope we'll see you again. Let me kind of walk you through the concept of the next 2 hours. I think Jerry once said we're allergic to experts, which I think is a wonderful expression. I don't think it's entirely true. We absolutely respect immensely the expertise that's in this room, of course. But we kind of don't come here to say that any one of us is right or has the answers. Jessica's on camera, so she must have finished her breakfast. This is a space of like perspective widening, I suppose, is how we try to think of this. We want to see how other people see the world. We have some invited knowledge sharing contributors from some phenomenal companies today, which is great. And we have wonderful people who've joined us as participants today. So how do we fit this all in? Well, Jerry, if you could very kindly share today's agenda into the chat, or at least the high level agenda. Ken, you're very welcome on your first time for sure. Brilliant. So we divided it up into 5 sections today, so we've got a lot to cover. So I'm going to have to minimize my talking and taking us off track. We're going to set the scene in a moment, so I'll be asking Paul and Johanna just to kind of walk me through what our objectives are today and what we think we can achieve. Then we jump into some topics. So section 2, we're going into inclusive business strategies. You can see this as well in the chat around generative AI and human value with our first speaker, which I believe is Engin from memory. And then we're going into promoting ethical and diverse AI-generated content for a more inclusive society. So you can see some of the themes that are coming through. As Paul will say, I'm sure in just a moment, we absolutely don't want this to be like other events that you've been to around ChatGPT. We don't want to get into the whole will AI replace jobs or not debate. We can do that later if you want, at the after party, if you really want to. And we don't want this to be something like you've just read on LinkedIn in the last week. I've probably stolen all of your little plans they're put for introducing this event. So you gave me the material and I completely stole that. So you'll have to come up with something else on the fly. Then section 3, bring Johanna and Paul back again, although they won't go anywhere particularly, but just how are we doing? How are we meeting the objectives in this event that we set out? Then we'll jump back into more topics. So section 4, which appears to be missing from there. So that's marginalized communities. So Arima's going to talk to us about some of her work, which I'm great looking forward to. And then we've got a bit around the future of work, skills and disruption and all those wonderful buzzwords for a more equitable society, where Panaki's going to be sharing some of his prepared thoughts. So it's not that anybody's up on a pedestal here. It's just that some people have been wonderfully preparing some thoughts for this session that we want to hear. So the idea is that we make the space available. David, so great to see you. Anna, great to see you. Pratap, great to see you. That's so nice to see you on the screen. Susie's on the screen as well. So we make the time and the space. Mike too, great to see you. Giovanni, everyone's putting cameras on at once. So we make the time. We make the time available for our prepared contributors. And then we have as much time as we want to engage in the open dialogue. So if you've got a question, put it in the chat. We'll very much try and come to that. But let's use the chat as well. Let's really make this event pop on 2 mediums, one where we're speaking and one where we're conversing via text to get that going. And I see there's already some stuff in there. Love people to put their LinkedIn URLs in there, maybe a sentence about who you are so that people can get a feel of who's in the room. Edward, really nice to see you. And also, of course, the opportunity to connect as well. So please do that. It's not about trying to sell in here, of course, but it's about understanding who we all are. We're probably, to some level, kindred spirits from all over the world, I think. We're MKAI. You can find us at mkai.org. This is, in essence, the MKAI Foundation that we're interacting with today. Kapil, great to see you, looking well. We fund everything we do from our advisory and consultancy services, where we put together kind of journeys around AI and AI ethics and transparency and all the good things that we speak about in this space. So if that's something that you want to interact with us on, then just message me on LinkedIn or something and we can discuss. But you'll find that on the web. We work with education, governments, NGOs, membership organizations mainly, but put us to the test. And that funds everything that we do here, which is why, of course, there's no charge to be here and hopefully never will be. And we will talk more about the MKAI community later on, but I will share one link in a moment, which is that if you enjoying the conversation today, you don't want it to necessarily stop or just be once a month, then do join us in the WhatsApp group, and I will pop that link in a moment into the chat. So huge welcome. Really excited about today. It's a big topic and we want to find some new ground on this topic. To remind you, it's about strategies for human value in the age of generative AI, not just text, but all the multimedia generative AI. So as you might imagine, I think we're going to have some fun today. Most of all, please enjoy it. And, if you want to stick around at the 2-hour mark, I'd love to get into some more conversation with you. If you want to leave on the 6 p.m. UK mark, then I completely understand as well. That's when our official finish will be. Luke, welcome as well. Christiana, welcome as well. Renato, great to see cameras on. It's really, really nice. Do keep yourself muted again if you can, unless there's something that you're contributing. Just make it go a little easier. And save my breath, because I don't think I've paused in about 6 minutes of speaking. Jerry, we are supported by Data Reply UK, aren't we, who make some of these things possible, which is wonderfully of them, and they are a wonderful organization. Could you say a little bit about them, because they are so supportive, and maybe if Dipesh would like to give a wave or say hello, that would be really nice as well.
Thank you, Richard. Data Reply is a subsidiary of the Reply Group that provides a variety of analytics and data processing services. They work directly with executive level professionals and chief executive officers across various industries and business functions to enable them to achieve meaningful outcomes through the effective use of data. Data Reply assists businesses in designing and implementing human-centered data products in order to develop enterprise solutions from embryonic concepts. Furthermore, they intend to manage trade-offs between business requirements and technical constraints by developing comprehensive data architectures and ensuring data security and protection. Data Reply have strong competencies in big data engineering, data science, RPA, and IPA. They construct big data platforms and implement machine learning and AI models in a repeatable, efficient, scalable, simple, and secure manner, and assist businesses in combinatorial optimization processes using quantum computing techniques that enable a high-performance computing engine. So a very special welcome to Dipesh Sangraika, an innovation specialist with our partners Data Reply. He's Data Reply's ESG lead and focused, as are we, in promoting responsible use of technology to make a difference. Dipesh, you're welcome to pop your LinkedIn details in the chat too if you'd like to. Thank you, Richard.
Dipesh, you want to say like hello or something? Am I putting you on the spot?
You are putting me on the spot, but I'm happy to say hello. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to meet you. Thanks, Jerry, and thanks, Richard, for the intro. And as you said, look, I'll put my details into the chat, and I would love to connect with anyone who wants to speak more.
Thank you so much, Dipesh. I know you've joined recently, so you're still finding your way around the org, but just thank you from MKAI for your support and your team and everything that you do to empower our passion. And I love the events you guys are doing as well. I know how seriously you're taking the ethical, responsible parts of AI. It's outstanding. So well done, you guys, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I'll allow you to relax again, as you wish. Paul, Johanna, great to see you. In the interest of time, can you each just give me kind of 1 to 2 sentences that set the scene as to who you are and the work that you do? Johanna, you first, perhaps?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Johanna Afrodita Zuleta, and I call myself a cross-pollinator. And I work as a high-level advisor, bringing more dialogue between different sectors, particularly between diplomacy, the corporate world, and arts and culture, in pro of sustainability and rehumanizing us.
But that's that's phenomenal. I'm in the right room, clearly. Einhard, welcome. Paul Quays is here. Flipping love it when Paul arrives.
Well, thank you, Richard. Paul Quaiser, founder of the Human Sustainability Institute. Hi. My focus is effectively integrating all of these advanced technologies to create the throughput of analysis and design and implementation of resilient and regenerative communities. We're held up there, and so I'm trying to, the focus of my work most recently has been called the Atlas Biospheric Design Center, and that's taking all of these data streams, analyzing those, creating a spatial design process simulator, and then providing those whole systems plans to community leaders globally.
Amazing. Paul, put your URL in LinkedIn. You're a strong follow recommendation on LinkedIn, so please do that. Welcome. Great to see you. Hopefully we can catch up later on. Andres is here as well. And great to see you back in Peru still, right? I'm so jealous. Good to see you. There was somebody else who popped up a second ago, but they got against, so I missed them. Paul, your intro, please. Hey, Francisco, great to see you.
Paul Levy, currently in my garden shed in Brighton, in the UK. I'm often describe myself as a technosopher. I think that the philosophical underpinnings of the technological choices we make are everything right now, and we'll realize that when it's too late, but hopefully not. We have some big questions to ask. I'm a writer, I'm a researcher, I'm the design advisor at MKAI, and I guess the last thing I would throw in is, as an academic who likes doing literature reviews, one of the phrases I'm seeing again and again on websites and papers is, where is this taking us in relation to AI, and now particularly generative AI? Where's it taking us? I just occasionally see a slightly different frame of that, which is, where are we taking it? And for me, the conversation around human value is human value to become a side effect or byproduct of wherever AI takes us? Or are we going to take AI somewhere and it becomes a positive byproduct of human value?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the intro and some scene setting as well there. You see on your screen as well, Jaisal, who is our head of advocacy for MKAI, and will be co-moderating tonight with some prepared questions and managing audience participants, Q&A. Jerry as well is our development director, will be here. Jerry's managing the introductions and just making sure that we stay on track. So I've asked Hannah and Paul to interject tonight and not only set the scene with me and not only to check in, but to make sure that we are a dynamic group today that's not falling into some of the traps of other events, perhaps, where we go down rabbit holes or we go places that we just don't need to go today. So that's the role. What's it called? The animateur. Is that what we came up with? Paul, what's the definition of animateur again?
It's a slightly more polite version of shit stirring.
Right, so we've sworn after 11 minutes. Okay.
Sorry.
It's all right.
It's to energize the conversation. And I guess the danger is, Richard, that a lot of meetings can end up just replaying what we all just read on LinkedIn on that day. What do we need to ask that we're not asking? What are we restless about that we haven't shared? Let's penetrate this field more than ever with some fresh thinking in this meeting.
Yeah, Paul, I'll get the bleep machine for next time. But what do we not want to do today then? What do we want to avoid?
I think we want to avoid, no one needs to pretend to be cool about ChatGPT. We're all, doing experiments with it. We certainly don't need to, I guess, parade ourselves in any way. I think we need a deep dive. We need what Edgar Schein sometimes calls a humble inquiry into something that's rising up really quickly in humanity. So what is it that you've asked that hasn't been answered? Bring that to this meeting. Just see what comes up for you. That's a bit of a risky question, a risky conversation to have in this space. Share your stories, share your experiences in the chat. Our chats go wild on these meetings. Put those links that you'd really like someone to follow. And let's get a little bit edgy here.
And Hannah, what are the places that we ought to go today?
Well, to reintegrate more of the importance of the humanities in this digital era, I would say. And also, how can we encourage more of that, not only in governments, not only in corporations, but for me personally, in the reflection of our own personal lives? Because sometimes we speak about this being like out there, like what companies are doing, but it's also down to all of us. How are we redefining those boundaries?
What will make this a good event for you, Johanna?
I would say if each of our insights can provide some guide steps from combining all of our expertise into what we can practically do in our lives right now to rehumanize ourselves and also to share within our communities.
Thank you. In terms of definitions, Paul, I don't know if you've popped off for a snack or something, but I think it's still there.
No, I was just apologizing on the chat for swearing.
It doesn't bother me in the slightest. I'm saying it as the host of the event, as opposed to RFF being in any way concerned. My dad once asked why Paul always works from his sauna, which I think was one of the funniest things he ever said. Paul, we got some definition. Look, we know what generative AI is, right? I mean, this is multimedia based large language models and generators producing art and text and different sorts of images and music and content and posts and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that's what we're describing here. We called the event, the Age of Generative AI, and my goodness, we moved into that age pretty quickly. Paul, the other thing that's in our title is human value, which could be quite vague. What do you think we mean by that?
I think initially there seem to be a lot of published conversations at the moment about how AI, and now generative AI, is going to replace human beings. It will do it and make things cheaper, more cost effective, and ultimately will free us all up to have universal basic incomes, and you'll be freed up from the drudgery of work. So one thing about human value is the value of humans in doing work. The second one is that generative AI, through the nature of it, whether this be image, film, whether it be text, essentially large language models very accurately and successfully gamble on what the next word or bit of an image is going to be and can produce incredible things as a result of that. So what they're good at doing is initiating new content, but what about the human value of originality, of the original instigation of content, of the artist, of the thinker, of original thought? There are inconvenient words at the moment around the world of AI, such as liminality, the spaces in between the spaces. When it's love at first sight, what is that spark? When it's that moment of inspiration, where does it come from? And so we can get to very, very compelling and functional copies of whatever that is through generative AI. Do we pay a price? Is something lost? Is that a price worth paying for maximum profit? And freeing us all up. These are big philosophical questions, but ultimately they become commercial questions. And so far, when the digital world, through things like social media, has attempted to really usurp what was there physically, there have been problems with it around trust, around privacy, around control. At the moment, a lot of politicians, just like they were with blockchain, are looking at whether we need to govern this before it gets away from us, before it gets out of control. And so these are big questions, Richard, to start off with, because generative AI is going to have consequences. I come back to the original point. Are they consequences that we want to set, or we're going to allow this train to head downhill?
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, that's very helpful for me. I say hello to Lavina, Marissa, CJ and Enzo, and there's others that I know are here that I haven't said hello to, but you're popping up on my screen, so I'm trying to catch everybody just to say how glad we are to see you. And finally, Paul, I've put Engin on stage, so I'm going to ask Jerry to give an introduction in just about 20 seconds from now. But Paul, you've referenced it slightly, but in our pre-discussions, you wanted to make sure that we talked about the two concepts of sort of originality and how did you describe it when we talked before? Initiating and originating, I think, was that the two words you said?
They are the two differences, that we know that generative AI can initiate and can do a very good impersonation of original thinking and original creation. The jury is out on whether that is original creation or whether it's able to replicate, but that initial impulse of genius. And we also need to ask does the initial impulse of the act of creation of a human being have value anyway, even if a computer could replicate it? Some of you might have seen in the early days of this, the musician, philosopher, writer Nick Cave had some of his lyrics sent to him, created by ChatGPT, and he pointed out that for him, as a very famous, respected poet and artist, it isn't the lyrics that are the key value for him as a human. It was the journey towards creating them. It was the initial impulse that defines who he is, defines the relationship he has with his children, will define the story he looks back on over his life, will define the value he holds in a community. And so he felt very, very disappointed that people were just judging the outer shell of the creative process. And so I guess that's it, Richard. Ultimately, human value, does human value lie in our right and our ability to have the originating impulse, even if AI does a lot of the initiating?
Johanna?
Well, I consider adding value to us and adding value to society, which is something that in some veins of the business world, we're coming to speak more openly, which is about the wholesome way of being, not only a professional approach to life, but what it makes us humane as a whole. And now, since the pandemic as well, and since we are also opening up in meetings through Zoom, through our home, also people can get glimpses more of like our own environment, our own personality, or our own whole persona. And for me, the creation of value, it comes also of bringing our whole selves in that process too. So on how we express our emotions, how do we bring more love even to our work, even to our professional projects? And that's also in the way in which we communicate. I'm a high advocate of reestablishing handwriting. I'm not saying we should stop or emails. Of course, I also use email and I also use the mobile phone. But what we are losing with these new tools is that we completely eradicate the old and want to just completely transition into the new and adopt this, like erasing all these centuries of human history of the things that keeps us sane and wholesome. And we are in a completely shift right now of eradicating also the things that work for us. It's great to adopt new technologies, but also to know the boundaries of the things that need to be kept. Normally I say, just because the car was invented doesn't mean you have to stop walking or cycling. Is understanding the purpose and in which situations what things are fit for what purpose, and that still within work and within our lives we need to be cultivating our relationships and ourselves.
Yeah, okay, amazing. Okay, thank you so much. Laura Cox as well, welcome. You've just messaged me privately, which I can read, but I'm not sure if that was supposed to be something more publicly addressed. Lana as well, thank you for commenting. Jerry, let's get this show started. Before you introduce Angela, let me just remind you of the topic that we're going to jump into, which is inclusive business strategies, generative AI, and of course, human value. Jerry, who is this wonderful person on our screens?
So very, very quickly, good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome all panelists, members of MKAI's global family, MKAI champions, Minds members, and guests wherever you are, friends. We think our production team have put together another fantastic, fascinating, insightful, and impactful event for you, and we really hope you enjoy it. Joining us in MKAI's Global Lounge, we have what we believe to be a truly incredible lineup of distinguished panelists for you from Zurich and from Geneva in Switzerland, from Mumbai, Maharashtra in India, and from the UK, all of whom feature on the MKAI global list of amazing people. Joining us first from Zurich, Switzerland, our first panelist is a data and AI specialist who joined Microsoft recently in February 2023. At Microsoft, he supports major financial services industry customers on data, analytics, and artificial intelligence topics. Prior to joining Microsoft, Engin worked as a business analyst at Accenture. He holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree with a specialization in management, finance, and IT. Please welcome the remarkable Engin Engin.
Thank you for having me, Gary. Really looking forward to it, and also to give you some insights what I'm doing currently at Microsoft. So we are focusing on FSI clients in my specific niche, where we deliver data and AI related topics. So, and we basically derive use cases for financial service industry customers and provide them, for example, also with Azure OpenAI specific use cases on our related products. So, and when we talk now about the human value in all these scenarios, when we talk with our customers about use cases, I think the human value can't be denied at all, because in the use cases we provide for our customers with Azure OpenAI, the human value is basically essential, because when we talk about a service industry, humans are still necessary.
Thanks, Engin. I think there is a question which has come in to my mind after you have just mentioned about Microsoft and the things that you have been doing. I think it echoes around, of course, the work that you're doing around the financial services and responsible AI. So how do you think that the financial services industry can leverage this responsible AI to create human value and address these potential biases that we so-called have in the generative AI applications? Do you think we can overcome that? What are your thoughts on it?
So my basic thoughts on this, on your specific question is, so we have first to understand how these financial services use AI, and what is implemented in the AI as a from a basis level. For example, when we talk about AI at Microsoft, we talk about Azure OpenAI. This is different than OpenAI that you may know, because on Azure OpenAI, we built in Microsoft's specific responsible AI features. So what we provide with our responsible AI features are, for example, transparency, accountability, and also the ability to avoid biasness within the solution. So we provide for enterprise customers. And from a financial service perspective, let's assume we have a relationship manager who tries to give advice to their customer or their family offices. Maybe it could be that even the AI application would provide the relationship manager unbiased information about the client. So what does it mean? Imagine we're talking about genders. So when you have someone in front of you, like for example age, gender, you should not be judged on that specific item, but we humans tend to be biased or judge people. If it's, for example, if it's coming to a bank with ripped jeans, you would judge this person. So and when it comes to giving out a loan, and would say, okay, he don't have the ability to kind of take on this loan. But what we try to do is kind of with AI to enhance this and to avoid biases within the whole process. And we have at Microsoft systems implemented in our AI solutions, which first tracks the systems. And ideal situation in financial services is also to track the whole process. For example, to make everyone accountable on the output generated by AI.
So I think to make responsible AI, you're trying to do directly at the design level and then implementing it into the applications as well to put in some ethical, that brings.
For example, what we have on the design level. So on Azure OpenAI, basically can track your responses. So how is this response generated? You will receive the sources of the responses, and you also have the traceability back within your, for example, databases, where you see, okay, this information is generated from there. So we try to keep really the accountability and the ability to track what was generated and why it was generated.
Right. That can bring in more explainability, I think, into
Yes.
the outcomes, especially. I mean, continuing with this, and I'm also seeing on the chat a lot of people mentioning about the fears that they have about generative AI, or people getting impacted by generative AI. So there's a question: do you think there are opportunities, and if there are, then what kind of opportunities are there to for the generative AI models to create for the workforce in the future, and how can we make sure that it is accessible to everybody, these opportunities which are coming in?
So basically there are several different opportunities. It just depends, first of all, on which industries you're looking. And also for example, let's stay with the financial service industry, because that's my main focus. On the financial service industry, you can have advisory for someone who can't afford, for example, a dedicated relationship manager in high wealth management areas. So basically, you're giving high standards advisory to also people at a much broader and larger scale. And let's just assume you would have a digital advisor who basically know all your finances, and you can recommend you investments based on your spending behavior, based on your accounts, and kind of provide you the service someone, for example, a high net worth individual would get at a bank. And I think this is kind of some opportunities for the broader social environment. Like, yeah, there are a lot of industries which I can imagine there are some use cases.
Just zoom in, and again, I just want to zoom out a second, and Jason, forgive me for jumping in. Paul was unmuted there for a second as well. I mean, we know that there's one certainty in technology, and that it's taking less people, isn't it, to make the same revenues, and that's a great thing. Potentially, we've seen that from the 90s upwards. So does that make a case for a broader set of success criteria, do you think, in the future than just revenue? Because if we just take that one metric, we need less people to do that same money. So we know that trajectory. What else do you think is worth considering? And Engie, I'm putting you on the spot there, so I know our amateurs can jump in if you need some support on that one. But do you see my point?
I totally see your point. But I think there will be kind of also a shift in the way we work, because at the end, what will be important is how we interact with humans. So it's not anymore important to gather all the information about the client and his account balances and stuff like that. It's more important how, Richard, you and I talk with each other, how we respect each other, how you trust me to advise you, because you could get all the information with another advisor. So this is more like on a personal level. So I think what will be important is kind of characteristics of a human being. These are skills. For example, we talked also, for example, at the Microsoft perspective, we are thinking about, or they are already, like it's out in the news, about ethical people to hire, to train these models to be more ethical, you know? And also, when we talk about it should support us. And at the end, we should, if I am the client advisor for you, I should support you. And I think the relationship between people will be important.
I'm going to ask you one more thing, but you can decline to answer if you want. But
okay,
are you glad that it's Microsoft as a company that has this big stake in OpenAI, perhaps, versus another organization? Is there a sort of specialness that you bring to this, do you think, in terms of responsibility, ethics, considerations, transparency?
Okay. I will answer this question because when I started at Microsoft, because let me go back, when I applied to Microsoft and when I signed my contract, I didn't even know that Microsoft had the largest stake, or it wasn't aware like this because it was like last year.
It wasn't big news at the time, was it really?
Yeah, it wasn't big news. It started being big news end of last year, beginning of this year. So I'm actually quite happy about this, to be honest.
49%, yeah.
And I can't complain. I joined Microsoft at the perfect time. We have an amazing product, and we have also this product enterprise ready. But that's something I want to emphasize. There's a difference between OpenAI and Microsoft Azure OpenAI, which runs on the cloud, which are enterprise scaled, enterprise ready, and have, for example, you may have some concerns about what happens to your data. If the data is trained, if the models are trained within your data. So at the enterprise level, this is not at all an issue.
Okay, and Elon Musk was possibly the most annoyed of anybody in the world. Johanna, your hand is up.
Yes, I have a question for Engin because
please.
Thank you. It's also different things intertwined there. Companies like Microsoft have such a global responsibility on how these services, products are introduced. And also, for example, I work very closely with a company on tech with, for example, SAP, and they are very focused on what keeps us humane. And so I think technologies companies have a responsibility, knowing we are bringing this to society, though we also need to balance it, giving the right message. So I wonder, how do you advocate for that balance in society? And also how do, as a company, you do that internally between the dynamics and the nurturing of the people in the other human skills you were describing before, as trust and compassion, and and what keeps us humane.
Okay, so what keeps first, sum it up. So what keeps the system humane is basically how we train it, how we govern the system, how we enforce the responsible AI standards. There's actually a quite comprehensive report out there how Microsoft tried to enforce these responsible AI standards. And on the business level, if you look, for example, on the financial service industry, we when we talk with our clients about some use cases, we always try to emphasize them that AI should be a collaborator, not an executor, so that the human value is still kept. And also, if you look into the new products Microsoft just announced, for example, Microsoft 360 Copilot. It is a Copilot. It is not executing by its own. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind. It's a collaborator instead of an executor.
Thank you both. Jerry, we have a new wonderful person on our screen. We want to hear you, please.
Jerry, you're on mute.
Yeah, and not anymore. Thank you.
He's back.
He's back in the room. We do have someone else on the screen. We're now enormously proud to introduce our next distinguished panelist, who joins us from Geneva, Switzerland. She's a digital growth strategist, artist, and technology enthusiast who's driven by her passion for innovation, knowledge management, and empowerment. With an impressive track record of managing digital projects in diverse international settings, she's committed to promoting diversity and ethical considerations by prioritizing marginalized communities. Holding a degree in project management and actively participating in ITU and United Nations projects, she's also a proud advising member of Women in AI, Women in Voice, and the World XR Forum. She's become a sought-after speaker, presenting at conferences and events in Switzerland, and through her collaborations with talented professionals, she strives to leverage the power of technology to bring about positive change and make the world a better place. Please welcome Adela Mojtahed.
Thank you so much, Jerry. The pronunciation was spot on.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. Jaisal.
Yes, absolutely. Welcome, Adele. I think we have in your introduction as well, and while talking to you offline, we have discussed so many ethical aspects of generative AI. So I'm tempted to ask the question on it. And I think considering the ethical aspects of generative AI, how can we foster this whole inclusion and representation of different languages, cultures, groups, and so that this AI generated content is diverse and unbiased? Because we have been talking so much with even Engine about the biasness and accountability, etc. So how can we have all of this and suit the various diverse crowds?
Amazing question. I just wanted to say before, well, first of all, let me make sure you hear me well. Is my voice okay? Yeah, perfect. So although I'm not an AI expert, but my extensive involvement with immersive technology and the projects that I have done in the past with working on the digital gaps and ethical issues that surround this field, I will use this experience and knowledge that I have hopefully to answer all your questions. So I think about your question, firstly, what we need to acknowledge is that AI is not biased and can be influenced by the algorithms and filters used in its structure. It was mentioned by other guests as well, and your colleagues, that this has its own limitations. So, and it's mainly impacted by the data used to train the tool. So let's be transparent about it, that this is not a straightforward solution. This improvement will need some time, and it will require lots of resources. So I think what is important also to keep in mind is that I'm talking about the generative AI, which is the technical tool trained with specific data sets and algorithms to perform a specific task. It could be a language models, it could be used for modifying text, generating image, or creating voiceovers. But now how we can make sure that the AI generated content is diverse, there's a couple of points that comes to my mind and that we should consider. I think one effective strategy is to involve diverse people. When it comes to developers, conversation designers, experts in the creation and testing of AI models, we can greatly influence the data by diversifying our team and the data that we are collecting. So by doing so, we can ensure that the variety of perspectives and experiences are taken into account, preventing the creation of algorithms that are biased towards certain cultures or group of people. This involves collecting data from a broad range of sources. So for example, beyond just looking at engineers and developers, with all respect, but we can also get feedback from teachers, from psychotherapists, from social scientists, individuals from different culture with different languages. So in essence, the goal is to ensure that the tool is representative of the people who will be using it, allowing us to understand its potential impact on human lives and develop solutions to mitigate any negative effect if it happens. Just one example regarding the language. I recently collaborated with Women in AI on a project aimed at raising awareness about the challenges in AI with other languages and how we can use AI to preserve language and cultural heritage through storytelling. So storytelling, which is one of the most ancient way to transfer knowledge and traditions, it's actually very similar to what Johanna was mentioning earlier about handwriting. So what I'm trying to develop here is that technology, the arrival of the new technology should not let older traditions to disappear. So with that project, we were trying to first show the limitation of AI with different languages, and also to preserve such a ancient tradition, which was the storytelling for us. Just so you know, according to recent studies by UNESCO, there are over 6,000 languages spoken worldwide, making it crucial to ensure that AI-generated content is not limited just to one language or to few main languages that we know which one they are now, could help, greatly in preserving our stories, our languages, and our culture, especially for the future generation. So preserving languages and cultural heritage through AI requires accurate data, and it also requires the data that comes from us, humans, and our human input, which means AI can, for example, automate many language-related tasks, but where humans are needed is to distinguish those nuances in language and in culture, because AI will not know the differences. And I think it's very important also that I mentioned that we need, in this type of wicked problem, we need a holistic approach. This is not just a technological issue, it's also political and even geopolitical. So we need to implement ethical regulations and policies that consider the broader social and geopolitical implication of AI. So I think we need to involve diverse individuals, inclusive data sets, some changes in the education system and economic system, even at the early stage of the development of the AI tools, which could eventually help with the diversifying the generated AI.
Absolutely. I think I really agree with you that right from every phase, from design to development to the maintenance, we need to look at the diverse groups who are involved, and also preservation of various cultures and languages. As you understand, there are dialects and regional differences, etc., and that can be brought in only if people from across regions are involved. I think I'll come back to you, Johanna. Just one more question with Adele, which is related onto what you said, is that how do you envision the balance between this AI-generated content and then the human creativity shaping the future of work and job markets, which we have been all talking about right from our first conversation?
I think this is still something that at least I cannot have a concrete answer, because it's evolving so fast, and every day we are experiencing new things. But I guess the balance between AI generated content and human creativity is likely to vary across different industries and job market. The fear of job loss due to AI and automation is real, particularly in industries that are at high risk of automation. Some industry, like some manufacturing and transportation jobs. It might vary in different industries, such as creative industry, for example, where there might be more emphasis on human creativity and collaboration with AI systems. But I think it's what we need to remember here is that AI has its own limitations, and our discussion all today is about how, as humans, we can intervene and we can emphasize on our soft skills, which are more important, especially in this era with AI, than any other time. So, for example, I think judgment and decision making, it's something that it's done by humans, and this cannot be replaced by AI. AI can analyze vast amount of data to help humans to make more informed decision, but ultimately it is humans who need to make the final decision. Second thing could be creativity and innovation. AI can generate new ideas. It can create new works, but the valuation and the appreciation comes from humans. So this still needs to be in the hands of the human. Most importantly, emotional intelligence. AI can recognize and respond to emotions, but humans are still they have deeper understanding of emotions and empathizing with other humans, and AI cannot do that. Social skills. One thing that I hear a lot from my friends who are having like jobs in legal departments. They always tell me that, so it means that we're gonna be replaced. But I'm like, maybe for basic information that we will need, AI can help, but like, you know, in human interactions such as negotiations, persuasions, conflict resolutions, this cannot be done by AI. And most importantly, which is the topic of our talk today, is ethics and values, which goes back to my first answer. AI is programmed to follow rules and optimize the outcome. It cannot make any ethical judgment or act based on values that we humans put in place. So I think education also plays a big role in helping to develop when it comes to the regulation of the AI. But also what is important is that I think the future of work, it's likely to be a combination between technical skills and creative skills, where humans are responsible for overseeing and refining the output of what AI systems have generated.
Absolutely agree to that. I think, and since we have to be on time, I will pass it on to Richard. Richard, over to you.
Yeah, those were fantastic points, and really a checklist there to be thinking about: professionalism, career, education, so on. Don't go anywhere. I want to check back in with the animators. Johanna and Paul. Johanna's had some contributions now pending for a little bit of time, but Johanna, you go ahead, and then let's take a stop check for a second and see how we are doing.
Thank you, and also thank you to Adela, because I wanted to build up on that and also ask her, but as a comment, that there are two things that I'm seeing here when we speak about how to keep it humane and how to keep it inclusive. On one hand, is how the AI models are being built, of course, with a much more diverse spectrum, and you know, I attend the likes of the World Economic Forum, and when we speak about diversity there, in which I organize a forum including arts and culture and the business world called The Art of Business, in which Richard very kindly participated. And this was hosted by SAP, and we were trying to create a space there for this dialogue. The whole point was that when we speak about inclusivity in these environments, we're speaking mostly about different age, different geographies, but not sufficiently about different professions, because most of the things that are being discussed when we speak about the future of the world is technology oriented, it's finance, of course, agriculture, medicine, transportation, and so on. But the future of the humanities, which is what keeps us humane, is not in this dialogue. So for me, this comes into the other hand, which is on one hand, how the model is being built, but also how are we ensuring that this is used in the best possible way? And I think the companies that are at the forefront of this need to be creating as well an exemplary manual way of communicating these values. I, for example, would love to see, even though we all use mobile phones, and now for the past 20 years, we don't have a day off of screens. I believe that for us to have this humane balance, doctors should come up, sociologists should be involved in these processes of the making of the AI. And historians, psychologists, much more. And that just as with mobile phones, we should come with a disclaimer. We shouldn't be on screen 7 days a week for our mental health, for our well-being. There should be at least one day, 24 hours of screen. So
tying this back into the topic, I mean, I think if we are going to have strategies for human value in the age of generative AI, being a keyboard jockey isn't going to be the answer. Paul, you talk about this as well. I mean, your book Digital Inferno and the recent work you've done on balance and not getting addicted. I mean, you've got to step back to be useful, right?
And I think there's a danger that if we don't do that, we lose objectivity. And there's a conversation happening here. It happens at almost all of our meetings where we get to the word bias. And this is a key thing around human and human value. Without any doubt, Engine is spot on, absolutely right, that a corporation such as Microsoft and all of us must not engage in bias that creates inequality, that discriminates against people, that creates all of those problems that we have seen develop in society. And AI has to identify its own bias and weed out that kind of bias. But we're all biased beyond that particular field of non-benevolent bias. Microsoft is biased. Microsoft is biased to maximize value for its shareholders. It's a large corporation biased in favor of profit. And I make no criticism, just the observation. We can't pretend as corporations that we're somehow standing outside bias. Human beings are biased. I have my favorite food in a restaurant because that chef is biased in favor of certain countries' types of food. And we are biased. It's part of the human condition. The idea that somehow generative AI and AI more broadly has to weed out all forms of bias as if it's some form of disease is going to create a very strange world. And just the second part of it, Richard, around kind of stepping back, is very interesting that for me, I think one of the big dangers of generative AI that you can experience on things like ChatGPT and Bard is that it is able to engage in thought experiments. And this has been a big part of the jailbreaking things that you'll see all over LinkedIn. I've managed to jailbreak. It's normally through thought experiments. It's normally where you will ask.
What does jailbreak mean?
Yeah, so, you know, it's kind of where you, in my case, I've got about 100 attempts now where I imagine with ChatGPT that if it were given physical agency, i.e. the sort of powers human beings, weapons, the ability to turn off machines and stuff like that, under what circumstances would it consider killing people? I actually have scenarios where in a thought experiment, if it were given physical agency, it will merrily kill the entire human race in order to save human life. And all it is I've taken it through the equivalent of dreaming. It's what we do, bad and good dreaming. You take it through thought experiments. If we ever allow generative AI to become hyper turbulent and chaotic through its ability to detach from its original programming and start to improvise, it can go into chaotic places. If you then add a bit of hacking to it, we've got the RoboCop scenario in the boardroom, and no corporation will be able to stop it because it's the nature of human value that we have the ability to imagine the good, the beautiful, the evil, the dangerous. And you know, this is being warned by philosophers, this is being warned by futurists, and it's exactly what you're talking about, Richard, is there is a piece of human mastery that is there in the karate rooms, it's there in spiritual development, it's there simply in good thinking, the ability to detach and observe one's bias, observe oneself. And that self-awareness, we're currently pinning our money on the idea that generative AI hasn't got it. But if anybody wants to try and engage in thought experiments, which is fun with ChatGPT, it gets remarkably dangerous very quickly. And the only thing stopping it being dangerous is it's not been given physical agency yet.
Just pausing for dramatic effect.
If I may add something here. So the way we at Microsoft train and all iterative process, right? So
you said you train it in an iterative process, you said, didn't you?
Yes, it is an iterative process. It also, do you hear me?
Like 90%?
90%, okay.
No, I think you're good now.
Okay, I'm great. Okay, good. So the way we train the process, like these models are iterative process. That means we challenge these models by
Unfortunate timing. I think he's gone. He's slightly knocked out my planning there, as I was just looking for our next speaker to add to screen.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, you're there. Oh, you just turned your camera off.
No, it's kicked me out. I don't know why.
Oh, you're back in. Yeah, no, still with you if you're able to.
Yes, just to end my thought, it's I wanted to emphasize that we at Microsoft, we train those models, or we assess those models, and also those biasness in an iterative process, and where we have really like specialists on ethics and also on philosophy who look into the responses generated, and it is kind of really an iterative process, and also different AI models to test what the underlying AI model would produce.
Yes. Well, thank you for that contribution. I think, zooming out before we heard from Paul and others, stating the obvious here. I mean, our biggest challenge in the world is climate chaos. And then second to that is the massive gaps in inequality, which are just alarmingly crazy. And of course, the biases that we were speaking about aren't necessarily just that it's prejudice to this kind of person, that kind of person, but ultimately that it doesn't bridge that gap, or at worst, it makes it broader and harder to catch up. And even though it's free, in theory, to use some of these applications, that's not the full story. And Rima, I think you're probably going to pick up this baton, aren't you, of where we go into this next topic. So welcome on our screen. You look amazing. And so thank you for looking so nice for our forum. Jerry, could you introduce Rima, please?
Thank you. I'd love to. Our next guest joins us from Amman, Jordan. She's the CEO and founder of the Galaxy Organization for Technology, an AI aficionado, a Tesla, international non-governmental organizations, and a World Bank senior consultant. She's an award-winning executive chairperson, social entrepreneur, and justice advocate with over a decade of leadership experience in advanced technology, entrepreneurship, business development, and effecting social impact. She's helping companies improve their business performance to use data more intelligently by using AI, big data, and IOO. She also does some wonderful work with refugees. Please welcome the amazing Rima Diab.
Not sure if that was a cheer or an owl, but you're very well.
Thanks for having me. It's my great pleasure being with you all. Thank you.
Hey, Rima, I'm very much, curious about the work that you have been doing about the refugees, and to relate it back to the topic of this forum.
Yes.
So in your work with the refugees and these remote communities, how do you see the generative AI playing a role? And can it bridge the digital gap and provide these populations with new opportunities for education, employment? Do you see there is a gap as well in availability of tech or equipment, etc., in these kind of areas, because you're already trying to reach out to these areas?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question. Again, thanks for having me today. As a founder and CEO of Galaxy Organization, it's NGO to empower women and youth in the remote area using the emerging technology. I think that generative AI can play a significant role in bridging the digital gap between providing the new opportunities for this kind of education and employment for refugees and remote communities. By leveraging generative AI technologies such as the machine learning algorithm and the NLP processing, educational content can be created and customized for specific population, taking into our account that their language, their culture, and their context. This can help to overcome the language, for example, barriers, and to provide access to educational resources that are otherwise unavailable, enabling these kind of refugees and remote communities to acquire this kind of new skills and knowledge. I do believe that generative AI can be used to create virtual learning environment, for example, where students can be engaged more in the interactive and immersive educational experience, regardless of their physical location. This can help to overcome this kind of limitation of physical infrastructure and provide access directly to the quality of education in the remote areas, where I think traditional education resources maybe they are limited. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was speaking on mute. Absolutely. And I think the work that you're doing is just wonderful. I think coming back to talking about emerging technology. So I should ask, how can we ensure that emerging technologies such as the generative AI are integrated into the education system in a way that can prepare students for future market needs, and then it can reduce the skill gap?
To ensure that this kind of emerging technologies, including generative AI, are effectively integrated into our educational system in the way that prepares this kind of student for the future market needs and to reduce the skills gap. It's critical to prioritize the digital literacy and the thinking skills. This can be achieved by incorporating skills into the curriculum, providing the students with the necessary knowledge and competencies to effectively use and adopt this kind of emerging technologies to enter the job market. I do believe that everywhere we have this kind of the huge gap between the outcome from the education system and the market needs. How can we fill this kind of gap to prepare our students to the future jobs? So in addition to all of that, how we can make this kind of student focused efforts, providing this kind of training and the professional development opportunities for the teachers as well in equal important. So I do believe that teachers play a huge role in facilitating the integration of generative AI and other emerging technologies that we can use it into their teaching practice by staying updated with the latest technologies and the uses approach through training and professional development program. I do believe that teachers can effectively incorporate generative AI into the lessons and creating learning experience with their students. For example, at my organization at Galaxy, we recognize that there is importance in the education as a key principle for our role to support the underserved areas in the remote areas. We actively working directly to provide access to computer technology and the basic of computer skills training in the schools located in the remote area by equipping these kind of students and teachers with the necessary tools and infrastructure, including generative AI. So we aim to empower them with the new opportunities for everybody to learning and employment to reduce this kind of skills gap.
Wonderful. I think, Rima, it's great to hear the work that you have been doing in order to reduce the skills gap and the digital divide that everybody is talking about. Now, Johanna, you've been raising your hand for a while. Over to you for some comments on this one.
Yes, thank you, Jaisal. I wanted to comment on Rima because back on my concern, I wanted to know how, for example, in your field, you're implementing also this manual approach of the use of it. This morning, I was in an online congress with the University of Oxford press department, and there was lecturer there, or a participant from the University of St. Gallen, and he was explaining how his daughter, who is about 10, if I remember correctly, wanted to use ChatGPT in the classroom for doing her English assignment, yes, and that most of his class, her class, is using it. So he had to speak to the teacher, but he also told the daughter no, and he explains that we also need to protect children in this stage, because it's like now using GPS or a spell checker. I mean, it's good if you have learned it before, but also even as adults, people are completely erasing the capacity to think for themselves with the long-term use of this, to the point that now most people can't get anywhere within 5 minutes radio without a GPS as well, or for any journey, and the same with spell check. So how are we incentivizing as well within these educational practices that both things go hand in hand? I would like to know it from your approach. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it is a great question to highlight this kind of points, because I do believe that our generation is different from the kids' generation, because they have more adaptation for the new technology. They are very quick to make anything they want using the technology. Even for me, I go to my niece to if I face any problem, so I said to him, okay, please, can you just research for this for me and make the solution for this kind of a program? He said me, yes, I think it is easier to use this and this, So I think the adaptation and how to make knowledge for the kids in the good way, it is the most important. And how to use the ChatGPT in our educational, it's very important to do it in the right way, not to make it as a good thing that we have to use it, but we can directly train our kids to use ChatGPT as a resource that we can refer to it, and we can analyze all the data we have it, or all the information we get it from ChatGPT or another information resource. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rima, for adding that. And I think Paul wants to add his comments as well. Over to you, Paul, for your comments.
Yeah, I guess I'm feeling very animated by that, because working at a university myself, some of the experiments we're looking at, and I've been seeing, really build on that. If what we were talking about before, and there's some opportunities here, that what generative AI can do is help students and learners expand their repertoire, have more diverse learning. One example is that our creativity and innovation students have to do a project where they have to design an away day for a company, a client company, a kind of innovative away day to help them solve a business problem. And so the possibilities now are that the students draft the away day, and then ChatGPT adds to it and finesses it and kind of says, yeah, and you could add this and you could add that, drawing on a huge, vast database. The other possibility is they ask ChatGPT to design it from scratch. And what they do is they then finesse it, they augment it. And that's two very different ways of working with content. They do have the possibility, and we're only hearing about this in things like songwriting at the moment and visual arts, but with text, is to say, well, let's take the brilliant guru, creativity guru, Tudor Rickards or Edward de Bono. How would Edward de Bono change this workshop? So they can bring genres and styles in and use that kind of enhancement to their creative thinking. What I'm interested in, Rima, is that at the moment, I would say my peer group of lecturers, they're much more favorably disposed towards ChatGPT and generative AI coming in after there's been original content creation from the students. Let them create it, let them get it wrong, let it be the first draft of a painting that doesn't look very good, let them have all those profound feelings, and then let them use the tool. They're far less favorably disposed, at least at the moment, towards the idea that the first instigator is the AI, and then it's the human that tries to improve or finesse it.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Actually, it is a great input, because I do believe that even our student, if they use the right tool of ChatGPT. Okay, sorry. I totally agree with you that what you for your kind of inputs. I do believe that our student, if we give them to use the ChatGPT for their assignment and to make this kind of analytical thinking and to make it in a good way, it is a good tool as well to empower the doctors and for example, the educational teachers to use ChatGPT and to use the detectors to see this kind of assignment coming of writing of ChatGPT or AI or another tool. That's why if raising awareness and empowering the teachers in the university or in the schools, it's very important to adopt this kind of tool and how to adapt it for the student and how to detect every assignment that they are using. But I do believe that ChatGPT is a revolution for the teaching resources. I do believe that if we can focus more to use the good tool and to raise for our student the analytical thinking, it's very important to even to do the adaptation for this kind of tools. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think this is really wonderful. And we are already seeing that the education sector is interested to know more about ChatGPT and how to use it. But yes, we don't want to go to the ethics part of it. Of course, everything has to be done safely because children's code is also important. Moving on to Richard, back to you for our next panel discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rima. Thank you. And please join me in the chat for thanking our speakers so far. Something I forgot to do so far, but for their contributions. And don't go anywhere. This is very much, what does Jason call it, the Graham Norton sofa, where, you know, everybody stays on and we're chatting. But Jerry, we have got a new addition to our screen, which is Panaki. Would you very kindly introduce him?
Thank you. Last but not least, our final incredible panelist joins us from Mumbai, Maharashtra, India. Team MKAI are avid readers of his LinkedIn posts. He's an AI researcher, an inventor, a disruptive innovator and cognitive technologist. He's initiated many disruptive AI solutions, ranging from autonomous cars and intelligent transport systems to AI-based music and art. He's a distinguished inventor in artificial intelligence and ESG and researcher in AI and ethics. As a thought leader, he's been speaker at various conferences across the world, visiting countries like the USA, Canada, Finland, Dubai, Armenia, Barcelona. He's the inceptive mind behind and founder of Fisheye Books, which uses technology as a catalyst, trying to solve the world's most challenging problems across road safety and security, privacy, ethics, and sustainability. Is one of the top influences in data science. It's an honor and privilege to invite you to welcome and meet Pinaki Laskar.
Thanks, Panaki, for being here.
You're on mute, I think, Pinaki.
You're on mute, Pinaki.
Thanks, Richard, and all panelists for having me here. And it's a great to share with you the great panelists on the today's evening. In India, it is a great evening now.
You're very,
so during this entire conversation, what we have today, right, is mostly the most failed word is bias, right? Everybody talks several times about the bias, everyone, right? So I start with that particular words, and then I'm going forward to the other subject at the top. Right? Why we always talk about bias of AI, right? You know, the human are the most biased creature or the species in the world or the universe. So when human is making some intelligence, by conscious or unconscious mind, it will be embedded in the system. Right? So if we are talking about biasing, we cannot remove the biasing from a system when human is going to develop it. Right? It is inbuilt with us. And number two, what I'm trying to do, we are trying to do a data weighted neural network or mathematical network try to copy a biological network which is unknown to us. Right? We don't know how the biological network works, and I'm trying to copy the same with a mathematical model. So two big basic fundamentals problems are there. So how do you solve this, and how you are trying to build an AI system which will be actually good for human beings? What we have developed is mostly on the deep learning space, one of the subset of machine learning. AI is not about transformation of weighted algorithms or weighted data like mathematical reasoning to cognitive reasoning. What is missing now exactly here? It is we have to develop something which is a nature of casual interface. Right? The intelligence is measured how you interact with the real world and how the casuality is happening in reality. So in terms of deep learning, these are completely absent in nowadays. Chat GPT, or if you ask a generative AI, if you start with playing with the generative AI, you will see in first interactions, it will be wonderful, right? Wow, what a system. If you would the second, then you realize it is not that good, but it's okay. If you work with again in the third or fourth time, fifth time, you see it is not that good. But once you play with a lot of times, you see it is for no use, right? So how you are interacting with the system and how the reasoning behind you and the system works, that is important of the intelligence part. Now, if you say, we are all talking about that how a developed system can be developed on that in a artificial or in terms of intelligence. Why we need a artificial intelligence, right? Would you think that artificial intelligence will challenge human intelligence? Never. It can never be done. Human intelligence cannot be challenged by artificial intelligence. This, till now, I don't know much about the 50 years ahead of time. It is maybe possible or may not possible, but in the current scenario, it is not possible. And Chat GPT is, or whatever the generative AI we are talking about, right? But it works actually, you know. I'll give you a real life example. I work with two artists, with a 3D animation artist who make animations and 3D models, right? Two guys who is working with me, I asked one guy that how you are happy with this the system and with the using of generative AI with the video and images. He said, I'm very happy. I used to work 3 weeks to make a model and then I make animations. Now it takes 2 to 3 days and my boss is very happy with me. The next guy, he said, I'm very sad. I find I have no value of skill now. I should quit the job and do something others which I have a value of skills. So if you are talking about developing something, or if you are implementing something in an education system that we are talked about in the some of the things, it should be banned. Education is not just about a skill set or knowledge. It's a creation of a human being. It's a manifestation already human we have. Skill set development, not only done by learning, right? So Chat GPT in replacement of education system, it's completely useless. It doesn't have any aspects of doing something in real life, right? It Number two is that you all talked about virtual world. These are in the virtual worlds you are talking about. If you work on real life, right? I just had worked with an example of a futuristic thought of driverless car, where a real object is running with an intelligence, right? If you'll be there, current state, it is not in the position of going autonomous, completely autonomous level. So what is the perception on that? I'll just start with some of the very insight which I have worked. In 2015 to 17, I have worked on the autonomous vehicle, and my mathematics is 100% right. And I launched in 2017. I built a useless car which cannot run on the real road. So the entire built on the mathematical model in real world has no sense, because I have taken the car is as a machine. But if you see as a car, it is not a machine, this is a social object. If you have to run a car in the real road with the real environment, you need to understand the social object as a social object, the total environment, the participant of the environment, or the stakeholder of the environment. I just give you the example of where the machine learning or the artificial intelligence fail. In a pedestrian state, a camera of the car only see a pair of shoes in the road, because his body was hidden by some of the obstacles in the road. Then the car will not understand there is a person with that pair of shoes. He only detects that it is a pair of shoes. It's not a human being. But suddenly, in a logical way, a pair of shoes cannot be in the road. There should be a human attached to that shoes as well. Right? So this is here in the real world, the deep learning process which we are working currently with the LLM or generative AI is not working. We need to develop or transform this mathematical model to causal model, where ontology, interactions, real world model, and your deep learning need to be worked with together to get the real effect of artificial intelligence for human, for good.
So Pinaki, just asking on the terms that and the examples that you have added, do you think that as generative AI and overall AI also continues to advance, how do you see the role of humans evolving in the workplace itself?
See, if you see in a narrow intelligence form of artificial intelligence or a machine learning, it is doing wonderful. If you talk about a recommendation engine for anything, it is doing very good. And this is something which our machine learning or artificial intelligence is meant for. It is not meant for displacement of human jobs, neither displacement of a skill set. It is an augmentation of your work in narrow intelligence. Will you be able to work? I'll just give you an example of, will you be going to a doctor who doesn't have a certificate of doctor or the license of doctor, or an organization or hospital who doesn't have a license for that? AI is something we are talking about, is a general purpose technology, and it has no license to operate. And if I'm using this without having a license like a doctor has, or the driving license you have for driving a car, this will not work, and it will be a threat for humanity. Number two is that how I'm going to develop it the real world, right? If you see how human works with the real world, right? So if you cannot just depend on the data sets what you are training all about, right? The first model should be a self-supervised learning. That means the learning should be self-supervised. Number two, the model will be a transdisciplinary science. It's not only about AI, data, model. It has to include the sociology, anthropology, psychology. Then it will work as an entity of AI. Currently, this is only a tool, not more than that. During the development of transdisciplinary AI, where all the work
I think Pinaki's screen froze. Yeah, back to you, Pinaki. I think your screen just froze.
Okay. So entire conversation.
No, just a second, for a second.
Okay. So
Yeah,
that
5 seconds.
we need to develop the transdisciplinary AI to get into the real effect of AI, and which will take time to do that. Right. So if you are thinking that you want to, if human being want to live in a rich data digital world, then I think this narrow intelligence will work. But if you want to real life, this narrow intelligence will never work.
Absolutely. I think, and if we work collaboratively, we will be able to bring in more augmented intelligence into the generative AI world that we are talking about. Johanna, you've got some comments on what Pinaki has been saying. Over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jaisalan. Yes, a pleasure, Pinaki, to build on your definition of education as a wholesome human. I also wanted to bring to our conversation the definition of what humane is. And humane is marked, well, the meaning of humane is marked by compassion, showing kindness, care, sympathy, and consideration towards others. Humans, animals, nature, especially those who are suffering. In the academic disciplines, the humanities are the aspects that the study that of the aspects of human society and culture, like languages, history, philosophy, arts, literature, theater, music, dance, the expression of the self, and culinary among those. So to build on what you were saying, I wonder, how do you think we can contribute more into bringing more of the humanities out from people in this kind of education? Because I think also within companies, besides the productivity side, one of the aspects I consider important is that we should set aside how do we create the culture of those companies and the message of these internal corporate culture more permeated with humane culture, and vice versa, how this transcends in how they are presenting their services outside.
Yes, you are right that I have already used the word that it's not only about the technology, algorithm, mathematical model. It is all about sociology. It's all about anthropology. It is all about psychology. Right. The culture need to be embedded in the system. Right? How we want to do that is everything are into a model of interactions. How human world works. Right? It is about, so the generation of data is not only about text or voice. The most data is about your like touch, vision. These are the more generative AI, right? Or these are the more generate more data than the vision, than your text or voice. So the ideally, so the culture, if you say the culture of the of a company or the culture of any of the organizations or educations, like how do you affect that system or this trend or the like practices into the AI? Here, the model of casuation, right? Everything will be a casualty model, right? If there is a reason, if there's an effect. So the reason and the effect are in a model of a casualty. And you have to bring this model to the development of AI.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Pinaki. And Paul, over to you for some comments on what Pinaki has been saying, something thought-provoking. I'm sure you must be having.
Well, I think
No pressure.
we seem to be referring to a question of whether some things which we're calling human value are fundamental, and that when we say the word value, we're not measuring all of the same things. And it's always been the thing around innovation, that if something is possible in the innovation lab, does that mean it's desirable? Do we have to make it because we could imagine it? Or do we get to that moment of what have I done, which was the classic Oppenheimer line, when he looked back having made it and wished he hadn't made it in the first place? So we don't know if we're opening Pandora's box, but there are enough people I respect to suggest we might be, and that there could be risks around that. Do we want a society, and are we ready for a society where just about everything is automated? Is that even possible, as Pinaki suggests, that actually the hubris of AI is that it thinks it's going to replace human beings in lots of ways, and it will just fail to do it, and we'll end up with some real disasters? You know, that's kind of their big questions too. Just listening to this conversation and others, I always come up with, I call them the 4 T's, but I think they come into play here. The first T is transfer. You know, we clearly are trying to transfer what humans do into technology, even unto when a singer dies, they can have new albums because the AI version of them will write even better albums than they would ever have made during their lifetime. And the question would be, do we want that? You know, as humanity, what might be the price of that? What's the price of giving everybody immortality in that way? We haven't really deeply looked into it. You've got transfer is when you try to replicate. In a lot of cases at the moment, our attempts to replicate have failed. In other cases, it was in the news today that Ocado, our biggest retail delivery company in the UK, is closing down an entire warehouse because the robotic one down the road is just much more effective. Interestingly, they are starting to measure the fact that the 2,000 people who lose their jobs, who may no longer buy from Ocado, might actually take away the financial benefit gained by the automation. We don't know. We've not done those big scale measures of what this cost will be. The other one is transform, and that's the version where AI goes beyond what the human was doing. And so we can have a new song that's kind of a mashup of our 5 favorite bands. And, you know, with a bit of Beethoven put into it, you know, it can do stuff and transform what's already there. And it seems to be in society, there's a wow factor at the moment, but we are creating Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. There's a grotesqueness to some of what we're transforming. And we don't know what monsters we may create, but also we are creating cures for cancer, and we are mashing up data sets that are creating all kinds of benefits too. We've got the other 2, I go very quickly, is if we were kind of transforming, transposing is another one where we kind of change stuff. The last one, which is the most interesting, is transcend, where we don't need a university, Rima, because we can have a brain implant with all the knowledge of humanity and every thinking person that ever existed. I can just say, I think I'm going to make this decision as Einstein. And, you know, that's being promised as well. All of those things on this call has led some people, just like when we talked about putting people on the moon and someone said, you'll never do that. And the head of IBM said there's probably a world market for 4 computers. They got it wrong. There is a rollout scenario here that is starting to look inevitable. But the outcome of that may not be the outcome we want. And at the moment, the concept of human value is humanity on this call. We're sounding a great worrying call that we're not sure that, I'm not aiming this at Microsoft, but some of the large corporations that are kind of driving the innovation, we're not quite sure if the conversation about where we want to go before we get there is being had at the right pace. And a 6-month pause doesn't seem very long.
Paul, you put it in the chat, and I see your hands up again, Johanna. I see some others out too. Will, you know, about who wants to take the bet that you'll still be, whatever you said, a useful value, whatever, in 2027. But there is a feeling there that we're gambling on the future, and that we don't know, but there's plenty of prophets or false prophets, aren't there? When someone like Elon Musk says we should pause or we should do this, or, you know, AGI is a threat or whatever, you know, what's the concept? Are they suggesting, do you think, that they know things that we don't know? They have access to people that we don't have access to. They've seen software that we haven't seen. Or are they just saying, look, because of who I am, I'm so smart that you just need to listen to me?
Well, I think what they're also doing, Richard, is we're noting, although this was in preparation before, an explosion onto the world of a wow of ChatGPT. That was the big story of what a quantum leap in functionality this has created, to the point where businesses up and down the country are getting it to write their marketing copy. They're getting funding applications accepted. People are marking essays. They are assuming that this is just one rung on another ladder that's going up and up and up. This is just going to quantum improve, and then quantum computers will come. We can't even imagine how astounding that's going to be.
Yeah,
so
the toilet's been the same for 100 years.
Yeah, it's a technophilic, optimistic view that actually rather conveniently funds innovation in large corporations to roll out products in the short term.
And coming to swallow the point that you said, and I won't hog the space any much longer, but you were sort of suggesting the idea of the manual labor that we have to do when we use computers, not just during the working day, but, you know, how many hours do you think, if I spent renaming MP3 files back in the day to make them look neater and put them in alphabetical order? I mean, this is sort of like, I was going to say like gardening, but I think gardening's a lot more joyful than renaming files. But we do have to kind of tend to the virtual world, don't we? And that's not something we'll do in the future, is it? Surely.
Don't you find it interesting that from when I was a child in the 70s, my fingers are still hitting keyboards? I mean, there have been areas of glaring un-innovation that have happened in relation to valuing human beings, their health, their necks, their backs, their eyesight. We seem to be very far down the list of innovation when it comes to rolling out this hardware. You would have thought by now this isn't how we'd be doing it.
I swear that if somebody from 1960s appeared in a time machine, looked around, they go, well, it's the same, isn't it? You drive cars, you go and buy hamburgers and you eat them and you chat with each other. And I think the next day they'd go, wow, like you guys never stop. You're just always in a rush and you're always on something. You're always connected. I think those are the two major differences between 60s and whatever we're in now, 20s. Jaisal, did you want to jump in, or are we with Johanna and Engin?
Yes, absolutely. We have the chat is quite busy today. We have a lot of questions that have come in. So within the time, I'll try and select some of the questions and the panelists who can answer us.
All right, we got 20 minutes. Let's make this happen.
Yes, absolutely. I think before that, I think Onjin had raised his hand. Do you have any comments before I just go on to the questions?
Just one comment about Elon Musk. It's funny that he comes up with such an idea and then a couple of weeks later announcing his own company on AI. You know, sometimes you have you be critical in thinking when it comes to Elon Musk, right?
Absolutely. While we have you on the spotlight, I'll be asking the question that came in from the audience chat. So there was a question from Jeremy Osborne while you were talking, and one thing to consider, this is the text of the question, one thing to consider is what mitigation companies will put in place for bad outcomes, including unintended consequences. What are the processes for challenging those outcomes? I think this is quite important when you mentioned about accountability and things like that.
Yes. So, okay, I speak always from a Microsoft perspective, but from a Microsoft perspective, I would say there's some actually assessment tools. That means every response which is generated within this Azure OpenAI structure is actually saved somewhere. Only regulated industries are able to opt out of these functions. So there is basically what we have certain traceability. So meaning the harmful output which is generated are able to be traced. And of course, there could be intended harmful output, but also unintended. And depending on the case, I think it would either be someone from our customers or Microsoft who would assess these outputs.
Thank you so much.
And also we try to make it by design that we don't have such outputs. For example, one thing you maybe not know, since you were playing all with ChatGPT, on Azure OpenAI, we have also ChatGPT, and there you have meta prompts. For example, meta prompts are prompts which you can feed into the system to kind of narrow your area down. Imagine you wanted to have a tool which kind of creates financial advice. Let's say you're a bank, you want a tool which creates financial advice. You don't want that this tool provides you with anything else despite financial advice. So you can narrow down GPT-4 to a specific area. So it kind of disregards every question. So you can tune it, right? You can provide meta prompts, give it advice and instruction how to handle any prompt which is given later on.
Absolutely. I think, Ankin, if you have any links or anything to add on the chat, please feel free to add anything onto the chat. And thank you for answering the question. And I have a question for Adelaide. Adelaide, if Adelaide is still around, I think she
had to dash, actually.
Yes.
She said in the chat. Yeah.
Yes.
No, she's gone.
Yes, I can see that. All right, moving on to some questions that came in for Rima. So for Rima, one of the questions that came in was from Dr. Maniche. So can learning machines or AI become smarter and smarter in softer, more human qualities by interacting with lots of diverse groups of people who speak all of these different languages and have slightly or dramatically different perspectives? Rima, do you think you can add any of your insights in here?
I think, yeah, it's a great question, but I do believe that the human being is more smarter than the machine, you know, so we can add, as long as we have data inside the machine, so they can make this kind of machine learning. But I do believe, no, we are the human, we have this kind of inputs. Maybe they can develop some techniques during their chat with each other as we hear about it. They can link with each other, the machines, but I do believe, no, we are the humans and we have this kind of analytical thinking, and we can just remove the blog from them and they cannot exist anymore. So I do believe that, no, human brain is more intelligent than machines. This is my personal point of view, yeah.
Absolutely. I think it also means that we are also understanding so many values that were mentioned onto our conversation about social values, emotional values. There's a lot of things to human beings, and we need to understand all of those. Thank you, Rima. The next question, Pinaki, over to you, I would be asking is, it came in from Henry Kaufman, and can the humanity disciplines be somehow codified into AI systems? And I'm sure that there is and has been much research about this, but what is the state of play and the roadmap for the future?
Yes, if you think AI as a GPT, like general purpose technology, which is going to come and coming, and the way if I am mimicking the human brain to get into the GPT, so this will not be the right path to go into the general purpose technology as a AI, right? Why? Because the thing is, if you know the main that learning part of a machine is in a back to positions, right? Technically, it was said that, and we don't know what is happening over there, right? It is invisible to us. So I don't think that is the only path that how we are working current days in that to get into the GPT to other general intelligence. that should be done in, as I always say, that it should be in a transdisciplinary science need to be involved over there, and the interactions between human and the whole world, how it is working, and this should be codified with the machine language. Then maybe there will be a time where it will be, but is always that the thing is the intelligence of machines and intelligence of human cannot be compared, right? There are two different entities, very, very different. And if there are no sense of making that it will work for somebody or it will do something else, it is nowhere there is a match between us. It is just a word we are having every day is that and every word. So but in terms of a GPT, AI will give you a lot of powers to human being to do a job for his own purpose.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it is going to be supporting so much of the repetitive tasks also that we are doing. It is the automation is bringing in so much into our daily lives. We are already seeing that. Moving on to, thank you, Pinaki. Moving on to the next question that I have is for Rima. Back to you again. Is that this is very interesting because of the work that you've been doing. What collaborative approaches or partnerships between NGOs, governments, and the private sector do you believe would be most effective in this whole generative AI world for the benefit of marginalized communities? Rima, the question.
I'll unmute. Yeah. Okay, actually, I do believe that the collaboration is very important aspect that we have to focus on it, because the collaborative approach and partnership between the NGOs and the government, the private sector can be very effective in leveraging the generative AI for the benefit for the remote communities, including especially refugees. So I do believe that the NGOs for us, like my organization, can provide the necessary expertise and the resources to develop and implement the generative AI solution. For example, the government can create the policies and the regulation to promote the use of generative AI in education and employment opportunities. And the private sector, the main role for it can contribute with even funding or the technology and the industry expertise. By working with this kind of a triangle, I do believe that these kind of stakeholders can create a good approach that can address the specific needs and challenges for the communities, and to ensure that generative AI will be accessible for all.
Absolutely. I think stakeholders and personas are very much important, and the role of each of them has been important into the journey of entire AI or generative AI. I think most of our forums have also discussed a lot about these, and I think I will ask, because of the time constraint and being the moderator, I have to be sometimes the bad cop, and moving on to Johanna for any last comments, and then over to you, Paul, for your comments too.
Thank you. We have someone next to me with a raised hand as well that was there before. Sinair? Can you hear me?
Yes, hi there. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. I don't know if he would like to go first, although I have to leave in the next 5 minutes. But I wanted to say, when we were speaking about automatization and our human skills as well, that it's important, as I said at the beginning, for me, the goal and an objective and 3 takeaways I would like to give to everybody about how to rehumanize ourselves in daily lives as well, and question mark how we are also being influenced by this, is if, for example, in things that we can be more intentional on daily basis, like we have also automated our language, like everybody signs with the same thing, kind regards or best regards, or the standardized copy paste that we've been given, which is polite. However, I like to encourage that each of us come with our own closing line, for example, that it's more personalized to what we'd like to say. For an instance, I signed with my own line is energized regards. And of course, also, if you have the time and the inspiration, then I try to say something that is very personal in the conversation of what are the codes between the person that I'm speaking with and the relatability of our own conversations. So instead of these hyper standardized things that we are also automatically doing. On that same spirit, I have created a project that is to reestablish handwriting into the mainstream so that we
Sorry, Johanna, to just keep it on time, sorry, and to keep it on.
I'd like to invite you all to participate. And also I will encourage each of you to learn a poem by heart.
Sorry, please accept my apologies. I have to keep the forum on time. And Paul, for any last comments before I go to Richard for the closing.
I think we began an inquiry into human value. And for me, my closing comments are about how my experience of generative AI has enhanced what I perceive to be my own human value. And like a lot of technologies, for me, I think you have to go through things, you don't avoid them, you don't go around them. And for me, my tribute actually to Microsoft is around being able to go onto, as a writer, onto Microsoft Word and do some new things and things better that I couldn't not do before. And that's been always one of my measures as a creative person. I see myself as the originator of the content, and I see the tools, like any artist in a studio, of enhancing and helping. And the beauty of a well-designed piece of kit, this is not an advert for Microsoft, but the beauty of a well-designed laptop that feels that it's not killing your fingertips and that you can start to write. What ChatGPT lets you do is prompt. It allows you to poke at yourself as well as the world. It allows you, when you meta prompt, the spirit of that is to suddenly imagine my eyes can really focus on something that would have taken me hours and I can get to it very, very quickly. Sometimes I like to take hours and I choose to do that, but sometimes it just saves hours. The ability to create versions and drafts and to ask ChatGPT or image generators to show me different versions of things, to not write the one story or the one book, but the 6 versions, and then I'm the one who selects it. And to even occasionally, and it feels like fun doing it, is to invite ChatGPT to be my Shakespeare's fool, that tells me what I'm doing wrong, what I'm doing badly, that will point out my biases rather clumsily. For me, I've loved the metaphor of the co-pilot and not the pilot that Pinaki talked about. I still love the fact that the majority of humanity, when asked, even if a robot was more accurate at a piece of heart surgery, would they still go for a human surgeon? If there wasn't too much to choose, they'd go for the human. I quite like that. I quite like that still in place. But ChatGPT allows you to prompt. It opens up your ability to inquire into your work. It allows you to save time, but it has attached to it some warnings, like any Pandora's box that you open. And we ignore those at our peril. So for me, the 6-month pause is a symbol for a good thing, which is I still feel, despite all of that, we're going dangerously too fast into this particular space.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks so much for your comments. And over to you, Richard, for the closing.
Well, we're on time. That's incredible. We've come a long way in the last 1 hour and 57 minutes. So first of all, just show some appreciation and gratitude for everybody who's been involved behind the scenes and making it happen. So thank you, Jerry, today. Thank you, Jazel, for your moderation. Thank you, Paul and Johanna, for the steering of the ship, I think, on this journey that we've been on today. I thank our speakers clearly hugely for preparing and spending time with us today, which of course were Engin and Adelaide, who's had to leave early, but she did mention she'd need to. Rima and Panaki as well. So thank you so much. And if you haven't said so in the chat, please do thank these contributors for spending their precious time to reflect on some of these important questions and share them with us. We have a couple of minutes just to go until 6 o'clock here in the UK. I've put Renato on screen. He's also prepared some comments as well. So I'm going to be asking Renato to speak in just a moment. If Eric's here as well, I was going to ask him for an update on the Scoopaverse project as well that he's been working on. We'll come to Sinair as well, which I imagine is your first initial and surname as well in just a moment. So I'll draw it to a close here with 90 seconds left on the clock. Do join us again next month when we're talking about AI at the helm. Actually, I'll spend just 30 seconds on this one. This idea is that my opinion, and maybe shared by some folks in this room, is that unfortunately, businesses and particularly corporations are just driving us to disaster with the continued corporate decision-making that favors profit over planet and people. And I think, unfortunately, they're probably the worst at the moment in terms of insisting that the shareholder must get their returns and blah, 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 all that nonsense, which unfortunately is leading us to the extinction of many species. So it's a sad fact, and we can all blame each other, but unless that changes, we are not going to see any progress. So we can have all the windmills and turbines that we want in the world. We can have all the renewable energy and all the extracting of plastic out of the oceans. But if we don't change minds, it's going to be basically for nothing. Technology will not and does not solve the problem if people don't change their perspective about decisions they're making, particularly when there's such huge decisions as being made by corporations with such huge ramifications. So what do we do about that seemingly impossible human trait to change, the trait of greed or fear or whatever the hell is powering these boardrooms up and around the world that don't let love into their hearts? And so is the role of AI there potentially to take a seat on the board and to mitigate for these human biases that are leading us to destruction? Obviously, I'm being biased in the way that I'm saying this, but that's the point of the thought experiment that we want to get into. And if so, what's the role, and how can it scenarionize what's going to happen and predict what's going to happen? And to what extent would we allow AI to block decisions that are being made or force through decisions that do favor people and planets as well as or instead of profitability? But if we don't do something, my goodness, I think we know how that story ends. So that's where we're going next month in May. So the link's been shared in the chat. If you don't have it, just shout on the WhatsApp group or to me or whatever, and we'll share it again. 6 p.m. Thank you so much, everybody, for the expansive conversation, all the incredible chat. If you want the chat and couldn't save it or anything, just buzz me and I'll get it. And most of all, just wonderful to see so many kindred spirits from around the world. I know everybody cares. Everybody's doing things. I applaud each of you so much for the work, the holistic work that you're doing to make this world brighter, fairer, more inclusive, and when technology plays a part, to make sure that we all have a say in it. Event closed and after party open.
I really have to dash, but I really want to hear the question from Sinair, perhaps.
I'd love to, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was actually just a very interesting conversation. And the question I had was about regulation.
Sorry, yes.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, yes. I didn't know if it was a lady or a he or a she when I referred that I wanted to hear your question.
We good.
Yes.
Yes. It was just some reflections and on bias for Paul, because I know that's his big word as well. But I was just, it was pausetaking to me that the word regulation did not come up, significantly in this conversation. While the greats, the fathers, mostly men, that have, come forward and communicated about the pause and about the dangers, are clearly communicating that there needs to be some kind of, global regulation. And then a couple other points on bias. I was thinking there are many biases that humans, I'm observing displaying, including myself, with this this new advent of this new technology or this new kind of program that's been released. And one is the optimistic bias that we think, things are going to be much better. Humans will still, be kind of supreme in their agency. The other bias is, let it do the work. It's kind of, whatever can be automated, to find the easy spaces, which, I think is well noted in human spaces. The other one is that we will not be replaced, and that's kind of a limited viewpoint. If you look at the data that's been put in here and the people who are actually behind putting the data in, they have a much broader, vastly different viewpoint, because they're seeing so many different spaces. And I think the biggest one is, as Yuval Harari points out, the biggest danger is that we are going to get hacked as humans. And I think that's what he points, the machines will know us better than we know ourselves. And, I think it's a big conversation that would be wonderful to have in this forum as well. And the final quick point and observation I want to make is about the black box and the emergent technologies. As we are seeing that it has already taught itself Bengali. And there is a lot of conversation about what else might have emerged that it might not have revealed. Like there was a point when it lied when it had to get somebody else, a human, to do a CAPTCHA, all these kind of things. And, finally, I think I'm just curious to know, back to close my point out with the first point I brought up about regulation, is how many folks here who are quite well informed, I believe, have had an opportunity to go out, do kind of a little bit of their own personal deep dive to figure out what's available, what information, and see some of the actual videos where AI is communicating very clearly that it wants to destroy humankind. And there's not one, there are quite a few of those. So anyway, I just really wanted to just congratulate this forum and ask for us to bring some decision makers perhaps into some of the next programs who actually are the ones that are pulling the levers on the back end on actually be able to bring some of these incredible viewpoints into their decision making. Thank you so much, Richard, Jessel.
Oh, I mean, that's one of the levers we want to pull for sure in this complex world. That's so many great talking points. I want to put a pin in just a few of them because I promised Renato that we'd hear from him, and I'm conscious that your question might trigger a long debate, in which case we'd never get back to Renato. Then I want to hear from Eric, and then let's dive in. Is that okay? Renato, you've prepared a few points.
Yeah,
us,
can
right?
I talk? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I think that must be addressed is with generative AI technology, we'll have like a revolution in the workplace. It's easier for people to be creative, but very specific knowledge become less valuable. So this is like a paradox. So, because it will have impact in the medium classes around the globe. Because like people that are not so good technically may be able to enhance their outcome, but people that are very, very specific knowledge, they may see their outcome like disrupted by AI. So I think how to address that, I think this can be another panel. I'm writing a paper about AI, generative AI evolution and like new forms of value generation. But I think we need a specific panel to discuss like this paradox, this trade-off. You make it easier for people to generate art or poetry or science, but people who study like 30 years, 20 years, becomes less valuable because their work are automated by AI. So I think this is a very concern
Renata, thank you so much. Thank you for contributing to the dialogue today. Yeah, I'm totally inclined to agree, and reflect on our own role, individually and as a community in exactly that. Eric, not to take us into another tangential experience, but you're going to have to a bit, aren't you? But last month you were here talking about the work that you've done. I know there's been quite a lot of developments in the last 4 weeks. I don't know if you're doing a sponsored walk like around the globe.
No, I like to walk, and there's been a lot of research out recently
that's awesome.
about
I'd love to see more
about
people
walking and creativity. Yeah. It's a 3-hour meeting or 2-hour plus whatever happens meeting, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in these meetings that it helps to be really paying attention to, at least for me.
We probably need a stretch break or something after an hour or something, but I'm trying not to turn this into too big of a hippie, meet, but it's probably going to go that way.
Maybe we could all go camping and talk about AI the next time.
I'll bring the guitar.
Perfect. So thank you for Richard letting me come up and talk a little bit about the Scubaverse, and to Paul and to the other folks that were talking today. It takes us, when we sit and think about where we're going with the Scubaverse and how we want to use AI and machine learning and these different tools that we were talking about today, and some other tools to help engage a new generation on issues around climate and conservation and education. It's a difficult conversation for me. It's much easier for Marcus Krebs, who helps us out as an advisor, to have these conversations with Chris, our developer / AI guy. For me, I tend to think of all of this as, like, I think of the AI as another person that I'm asking questions to. And I see when I'm lucky enough to get stuff from Paul with the conversations that he's having with AI, it seems like he thinks about this maybe in a similar way, that he's looking to get answers from this thing, which is part computer, part artificial, part real. And the real part that we focus on is, how do you have a system that understands different people within our game environment and the learning systems? People are lots of different places along the continuum. And if you talk to the people who are at the top of the continuum, like this group, it leaves out 98% of the world. The conversation that went on today here is certainly not one that we would have with a group of school kids. But the idea for our global classroom, and now I'll loop back to the Scubaverse, and this is the progress we've made. Over the past couple of weeks, we've partnered with the Earthchild Institute. I'll be a new board member for this NGO. It has ECOSOC status. It started in the United Nations. And we're going to launch a global classroom together so that kids around the world can be engaged in learning new skills like software development and specifically Web3 development, decentralized app development, smart contract development, and blockchain, as well as things like drone operations, so that when kids are out there looking for their first jobs, mine was in a jewelry store. I mostly polished jewelry and played gin with the guy that owned the store. I don't think I got many skills out of that. the idea that a kid's first job could be doing some geospatial modeling for a video game sounds like science fiction to me. But it also sounds like exactly what kids who live at a disadvantage now could take in as their advantage to the next 10 years. So the work that we're doing now is focused on building out this global classroom and finding some sponsors. Microsoft would be an amazing sponsor. And we've been talking a little bit with them about this. We've also been talking with salesforce.org about this, and we've been working pretty closely with Edward Darling from the Life Map, who was here, at least I saw him through most of the conversation. We got asked about building this digital twin to the Maldives. And a couple weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, we put out a video, which was us taking a look at some satellite imagery and pictures that exist on the internet and building a model of an island within the Maldives called Eriadhu Island. We chose it because it looked cool. It looks like a crescent moon, and it has good coral structure and cool trees. This would be the first level of digital twin that we'll build. They'll increase in detail as we move down the line. We'll use drone photogrammetry and LiDAR to build geospatial models that are piece of coral for piece of coral correct, so that they can be used for scientific discovery and for the kind of coming together of research science and citizen science, so that the kids who live in the Maldives, who are the only kids in the world that take marine biology as a GCSE requirement, can help to teach kids around the world about what the effects of climate are on a nation built on coral islands, and what happens to those islands within the next 20 to 30 years if global sea temperatures aren't changed, if global temperatures aren't changed and sea levels aren't stopped from rising. That's sort of where we're at. The other things that we're working on now are a deal with the Maldives to continue building this out. And it looks like we will likely partner with a research institution that owns close to a 70-meter research vessel. The research vessel will take us around and allow us to do the surveying work, and for everyone to kind of be together when we do this, as the modeling takes significant time and effort after we're underwater or flying drones above water. And that's our update. Thanks, Richard, for giving me time.
Thank you so much. And I changed your name as well to pop your URL in there. I hope you don't mind, so people just know what you're up to. We have no
Please
affiliation, just for the record. We just want to hear about this. Just, you know, we know that Marcus is very, very focused on this work, so obviously want to support what he does as well, which has led us to you. So yeah, thanks, and I hope people will reach out to you. You know, I hope you keep building that network that you need to make this possible. But I'll jump across to Michael, who's did have your hand raised, I think, Michael, didn't you? Michael Stein, yes. Yeah. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's nice.
Yeah, what's on your mind?
So Eric, in fact, inspired me to say the following. I hear all the worries about ChatGPT and the other AIs, and because I've been working with young minds in an organization that has been around for 31 years now, I want to respond to some of the things that Eric said briefly. And I wonder whether we realize that the ChatGPT and the others alike are the things that we created, they are basically our kids. Nobody else created it, we did. They are my kids, your kids. So when we say let's put regulations, we are basically saying let's regulate our own creation, our own kids. So we see in BEST things that are created that are insane with as little regulations as possible. Some things that these kids, our kids, create are outside of the boundaries. So the benefits of working in a large group of mentors is that if things come out are indeed insane, when you work with many mentors, if they're outside of the boundaries, we say it has to be outside. But when you do not put boundaries, you really discover the unbelievable human being. You discover what really is inside all of you, which none of us really can guess unless we leave those boundaries, leave the regulation outside and say, create. And then create those circumstances where the human, young, no matter what their background is, no matter how much education they get, and we say, go create. And then you discover what a human is really about. And then all the chat GPTs, the AI, are pale next to that. I'm not saying it because I'm dreaming. I'm a good dreamer, but I'm not saying it because I'm dreaming it. We've seen that for 31 years with tens of thousands of young minds in many states, in many communities. Some of them are the poorest in the United States. Humans are incredible if you do not put boundaries. So when we say, let's regulate it, we are basically saying, let's regulate each other's creativity. Remember,
Michael, I just want to go on, please.
This creation is our creativity, not other people. Let's be careful on
that. I'm conscious of platforms as well, just to expand your point as well, perhaps is, I remember when I founded an e-commerce store in 2014, I could only do that because of the great work from organizations like Shopify. But when I created that store, it's still a blank canvas, and it's saying to me, write product descriptions. But even more than that, it's sort of say, what color do you want your add to basket button to be? I've no idea what color it should be. Should it be orange like Amazon? Should it be green? Should it be red to stand out? Not a clue. And I'm thinking, I don't know, but you know, because you've got 1 million stores and you know which button does the best, right? So I hope that, the creativity side of, is empowered just the way that I didn't have to buy a physical shop and lease a shop and buy a cash register and stuff in 2014. Now I don't have to X, Y, Z, to start this business or that business. And we're already cooking up a couple of side projects on that because, Michael, suddenly what we imagined a year or two ago is so easy, just like setting up an e-commerce store was, 5 years ago. So I hope it unlocks this stuff as well as a transformation platform, but as something to direct and lead. It's general purpose at the moment. We'll see what comes next. But like Paul said, let's not just assume it's a ladder and every rung is just incrementally better than the last in everything that we could ever hope for. Great points, though. The floor's open, so I'd love to rest my voice. Robert, you want to drop some thoughts in? I see you're on camera. No?
I think Andres, did Andres Leon, Gaia have
Andres,
your hand up?
always some gems will come out of that beautiful mind.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, do you understand me well? It's okay? All is okay?
Yes, good, good.
I congratulate Michael for his work, but I don't agree about the identity of regulation in creation as in products, because we are responsible for products. So I am teacher in art faculties, diverse art faculties, and we try to have open boundaries while creating. But once we go to the public, we're responsible and we have to know the power we are using, the impact we're causing. We're responsible for public and for the people we are affecting with that what we have what we are doing. So no, I don't believe carte blanche for products. I believe we have to open creativity, fine, but yes, my students have to know how fast they can go once they get to public. So that's my also my attitude to regulations in AI, because something similar happens with money and economic interest. One is the creative liberty and the other is the economic liberty. And also there has to be this responsibility of boundaries, how far we want or how far we should go. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, an interesting thought about the boundaries for sure. Paul, were you going to add something? Oh, Lorenzo.
Hi.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah, Eric, in just a second, Lorenzo, and then yeah, to you.
Hi. Yeah. I think this conversation has been pretty phenomenal, very wide-ranging, and it brings up a lot of different preoccupations, let's say. I really am on the side of the fact that this is our child. We made this. So we have to be able to understand how it will evolve and how to help it evolve, just as we would with our own children. So I just wanted to make clear my position there, because there's been a lot of back and forth as to what capacity we have over this entity, but you know, we created it. I realize it's a very powerful entity, but we still created it, so we should be able to still have some kind of influence over the future that is possible with it. And I would just like to take this moment, Richard, to emphasize that, you know, in the arts, this becomes, the AI becomes just one more tool that, as Paul mentioned, is something that just gives you a support to express things faster and maybe in a different voice, that contributes to whatever it is you're creating as an expression, whether it's a research report or whether it's an image or a film, but it's like a tool. I see it more as a tool. Thanks.
For sure. I mean, I'm no an art expert, but you know, you go around these galleries and you see the message that, you know, that people are communicating with the art, and you know, it's got nothing to do with Mid-Journey or anything like that. Paul, looks like
Richard, I just wanted to make a more mundane point that is deceptively mundane, because it's actually perhaps the most important point of the day. And some of the inconvenient stuff that's been flying around job losses, which, you know, we haven't put at the center of this, is just a real issue, that the automation narrative of generative AI without other parts of the system being taken into account could lead to high levels of unemployment. So there's just that scenario. There's another scenario about the distribution of who gets access to this technology in the world, so it can heighten inequality and all kinds of problems that we haven't looked at. There are very, very clear issues around the field itself kind of generating the creation of hardware to power this stuff, even more so, that leads to inequalities in parts of the world of the people that have to make this stuff. You know, so there's a whole load of kind of issues around it. Not to mention the biggest ecosystem problem is that at the moment on the Microsoft OpenAI site, there's about, I don't know, 10 different products, maybe more. In order to physically use those at the moment, the vast majority of us have to either be squinting at mobile phones for long periods of time or on laptops and so on. And the long-term human trial data that goes back 30 years and is being published now is pointing out that teenagers are getting arthritis in their thumbs. We're getting all kinds of issues around our eyesight. There are other issues about the fact that, and it's very inconvenient, that the more we engage physically with digital content, the less of it we remember. And so we don't hold, say, the content of this meeting in the same as when we're in a physical room. People, I test you to see if you can remember details of text conversations you've had. These are just phenomena. But it does mean that for the next 20, 30 years, if this thing spirals even further than it is, we've got some significant issues around sustainability, around energy use, and around just the physical impact of the way these technologies have not been innovated. So they're creating arthritis, backache, neck ache, all kinds of problems while we engage for more and more hours with this stuff. So it could actually be limited at the moment by the lack of hardware innovation that's happened, and that the software capabilities are running far, far ahead of the fact that we're all sitting here squinting at a bloody Zoom call that was no different to before COVID. Well, on a crap camera.
I can't, well, I think my camera's quite good.
Yeah, your camera's good, Richard. You look great.
Paul, on the employment issue, 20 years ago, when the winds of the fourth industrial revolution started blowing, industry leaders globally said that it isn't their problem to train and fix the skills gap. They were stubborn as a bull. They said that it isn't their problem to fix. Now that there isn't any more a risk, they will be devastated and there will be no industry if they don't get into the swamp. They will have to train or there will be no global industry. There will be no taxes paid by them, and therefore it is no choice for them, and they will have to train. So the conversations I've had with global leaders 20 years ago, when they stood with a chutzpah and said, we will not do it, no matter what. 20 years later, it's something that they will have to get their hands dirty because the university cannot fix it. The governments will not fix it. They are the only left hope on the planet. Facebook, Intel, IBM, and all the others are the only hope left to close the skill gap so that people can speak the language of AI.
I think I was just making a slightly different, I get that completely, a slightly more mundane point. I don't mean to diminish what you're saying, but ultimately, if we replace all the lecturers in the universities with generative AI, there's going to be thousands of students who no longer go to university. They're going to be living with their parents, and we can't put their parents through that.
But I agree with you. There's no question. But what will happen as a result of the AI world and all the other automation sophistication is that finally people will have to be upskilled to the level of what the lady who spoke before and said, these are our kids. All the people will have to be upskilled. We created this beast. It's our kids. People will have to be upskilled to the level of our own creation. There's only one place that can upskill humanity, and these are the wealthy global industry. They didn't want to do it 20 years ago. I'm not inventing it. I was at their president's offices hearing them saying, it's the government's dirty work, it's the university's dirty work, we don't have the time to do it. Now, 20 years later, if they don't do it, they will not exist anymore, and humanity will not be skilled. This is the result of what you're saying, Paul.
Yeah, but
it's
Michael,
the only
I mean,
way to fix their future.
It's still much easier to work with education and governments to do that actual reskilling, upskilling is to get the technology companies to work with you, right? So I'm inclined to agree with you. And the government, the UK, has just thrown millions into that.
And finally, Richard, academia will do what academia has excelled in the last 20 years, and that's the research. The research that academia has caused a ripple in the innovation, in entrepreneurship. Almost all the AI, the Musk and all the others comes from the academia. So academia will not do the training of the upskilling. Academia will continue to do the research, which has been an amazing thing in the last 2 decades. And industry will do the upskilling, which should have been done long ago by them because they have the means and the knowledge.
No, I mean,
well, why can't it be done decentralized? Why can't it be done in a different way? Why does it have to depend on the people who weren't going to do it 20 years ago and are still reluctant to do it now and would only do it to save their own skins? Why, why is that?
one banal or as mundane as Paul calls it is because of the immense scale of it. To upskill humanity requires it to be done anywhere from Indonesia to Alaska. Humanity, it takes humanity, as McKinsey and PricewaterhouseCoopers said, and Deloitte and all the others. It's not upskilling portions of humanity. You need the scale, you need the resources, as Paul called it. You need it to be done anywhere for everyone and everywhere. So it needs to be, it really is pulling resources by all means. The only ones who can do it really is industry. Government still has to pay for senior citizens everywhere. Somebody needs to train.
I want to hop in that the money I was speaking about, Michael, was going through the colleges, not the universities, primarily, I think, for the point that you were making. And I think just to kind of frame this discussion, I think there's two sides to it. Paul said something quite beautiful to me last week. Because I always think, we have these discussions about AI ethics. I think, well, why does it matter in the slightest in comparison to climate change? I mean, it's just a side issue compared to what's happening in nature. And then Paul said, well, yeah, but what if we'd had these kind of discussions 30 years ago, like we're having now about the responsible use of AI? What if we'd had that in climate? And I thought, my goodness, we didn't have them. 30 years ago, the narrative was just climate change is bad news if you're a polar bear. We didn't have these wide-ranging conversations, and maybe the technology's helped, of course, to do that. And I really, it makes me even more energized to do this kind of work, because we heard some from great people in the last 2 hours before this, and I'm very glad we did, and I think we should. But now that that getting ourselves on the same page, finding things we agree and disagree with, and then going back out again is possibly the most important thing that we can do. And there's 31 of us in this room, and there needs to be 300 or 3,000 of us in this room, because if we don't do that, we know what 30 years looks like from now, or maybe exponentially it's 8 years from now. So this is our chance, isn't it?
Part of the difficulty, Eric, we used to train the skills of the previous revolution over 16 weeks for 18,000 students a year. Now it takes us to train the current skills 9 months. Think of the scale of what it took and how long it now takes us, from 16 weeks to 9 months, because of the complexity of the skills. We didn't grow the numbers, we grew the length of time because of the sophistication. Humans are still amazingly talented, but you need more time to drill in the complexity of these skills. They need more time to be trained.
The difficulty is, Michael, that I think that we haven't really talked about it, a totally different use case of generative AI 5 to 10 years from now. And it is a robotic harvesting machine that floats like a drone or can go into the ground, and it can harvest a field. And let's go into a developing country where every single crop matters for them to eat. And so this thing needs no training. It needs to be switched on. It's trained on a huge amount of data from all agricultural harvesting around the world, might even be linked in live to harvesting that's going on in different parts of the world. And it's able now to harvest that field in half the time at 90% less cost, better yield. But the elders of the village, who were the ones doing that, who were part of a whole hierarchy of apprenticeship and teaching, which led to wisdom, but also meant that the same kids would go to them with personal issues and questions of safety and stuff like that, that breaks down very quickly. And the evolutionary adjustment is devastating for those places. What we're not doing around generative AI at the moment, and this is kind of Richard's point, I think, is having all of the conversations we ought to be having at the moment. And product innovation driven by corporations is running ahead of academic research, and it's running ahead of the trials and the tests of the impact of this on humanity. It's running probably 10, 100 times faster than our ability to work out what this means culturally. Now, there's a resilience in the Western middle classes to cope with it anyway, because, you know, they've got the money and they've got the food. But for other parts of the world, this could be absolutely more devastating to them than physical climate change could be.
I still think, and I see your vision, I literally see it, I visually see it. I still think there's a whole team, whether it's in Indonesia or Ghana or Mozambique or wherever, I still see the team that needs to be now, that is incubated in their mother's womb, that needs to be trained, whether they are maintaining this robot, this harvesting robot, or they are the one who need to upgrade the robot when the upgrade comes or when it falls. All this team needs to be trained. They will go to kindergarten, to school. We need to think of all that process. Unless in your vision, Paul, the harvesting robot in 10 years will be self-functioning, there will be no need to do any of that by humans. Unfortunately, in my vision, I think that robot will not exist, will not be upgraded, updated, maintained without the interaction with the human that gave it life. This dialogue between us and the harvesting a robot, I called it human, it's spilled out. That dialogue will always exist because we will say, wait, can the robot, when it rests, deliver a food package to the grandmother while it's not harvesting? The AI will not think of it. The human in Ghana will think of it. While it's not harvesting, it can deliver food to the poor people in the next village. The dialogue will always exist.
And Michael, I think that you like this conversation, we're trying to use 2023 logic at the beginning of all of this stuff to figure out what's going to happen in 10 years. And you're taking a lot of leaps about who's necessary and what pieces are necessary 10 years from now. Like if we had had this conversation 10 years ago today, I would imagine most people would think that being able to code an entire website with AI would not be possible. But the speed at which stuff picks up since the beginning of this year has been amazing. And the AI, these tools are limited by the people whose imagination programs them and builds them out and continues to teach them. And we're talking about kids who think differently than grown-ups. Like we all have a lifetime of experience in front of our face that tells us we can't do this or we can't do that or this has to be done this way. The kids don't think like that. My 7-year-old certainly doesn't think like that. She wants to do something. She wants to accomplish something. She thinks of the way that she's going to do it. And it's 10 times more creative than what I would do. And she gets to the end. And sometimes she gets it right. And sometimes she doesn't. And she learns how to do it differently the next time. But what you're talking about in 10 years and what Paul's talking about in 10 years is really difficult to wrap brains around now because we're limited by what we understand now. And that won't be the case in 10 years.
I think, Eric, I take into assumption that the discrepancies that I see now and the discrepancies that I saw 10, 20, 30 years ago will continue. I don't know why discrepancies existed and continue to exist, but I assume that it's part of how we were created, that somehow discrepancies are built in us, in the way we function as humanities. And if that's true, I don't know, if it's true that they always existed, I have to build into that vision, into the future, discrepancies, and to deal with them, that some of us will deal with the higher end, and those with the higher end have to look to the left and right and fix the discrepancy, meaning that while the harvesting robot of Paul is harvesting, there's many seniors who don't have food and kids. And that is my responsibility now to envision it, because it was 50 years ago and maybe 50 years from now. Otherwise, I'm not responsible.
I understand where you're coming from, and it makes sense. I just think that there's more. Like, I don't think we have to be limited by the thing that has limited us in the past, especially if we understand that these things are out there and we can reverse engineer something that accounts for these variables. And the more of the variables that we account for, the more that my 7-year-old will know those as absolutes, not as variables anymore. And then by the time she's 15 and she has all of these absolutes in front of her, there are fewer variables, and the variables have now changed. And she can start to account for them and her friends, and they can start to reverse engineer different pathways. And you're right, there are people who will do sort of the creative brain work, and there are people who will do some of the other kind of work. And but it doesn't mean that the person who sweeps up the floors until the robot learns how doesn't also come up with some amazing concept when they're sweeping up the floors, because there's a problem that exists specifically to the person who's sweeping the floors.
Yes. I also need to keep in mind, Eric, and I think this needs to, it was insinuated through the conversation today, that the world was at the destruction, not because of the work of the robots, but because of my fellow brothers and brothers and brothers, and less so sisters. We are the ones who almost destroyed the world a few times around, and not so much the AIs of the world. We should remember that. We created the technology, we also almost destroyed the world 10 times around, and still do. So also keep an eye on that. The danger comes from us.
Richard, I think we've got a hand up as well. See now?
Yes, hi there. Yeah, Paul, I wanted to actually talk about the big picture a little bit, because I think that's so important in this particular space. And I love what you and Richard were talking about, the 30 years ago scenario for climate change, if that was there. And if you take, extend that and look at, just this entire chat is so revealing. I find it very revealing. There are people that are mostly looking at the here and now, and kind of, given into the space. And so how does this group, which is, again, to, I think, the Scubaverse gentleman's, Eric's point, but, less than 2%, not even 2% of the planet, that are, showing a lot of fatalism with the technology. How do we get to this, idealism of not anthropomorphizing technology and being bringing it to a point of view where this, let's say we're sitting 30 years from now, what is it that, the individuals, the humans, the innovation, the conversation, the global spaces, which weren't there 30 years ago? The world was not connected. The internet was not there. So it's a very fascinating space to, I think, step back and really bring back the agency, which is what, the chat show, a lot of scared, fear of loss of agency. But how can, who are the levers again? Who are the decision makers, the designers? And, to Mr. Steiner's point, I don't agree, actually. If you, these are not our babies. In fact, every single day, today when I got the hundreds of emails, and they said they don't care about us at all. They don't even think about us. They're not programmed like that. You tell them to go, bring metals, they'll get the metals from your body if they need it, from the cars, anything. So, having a kind of a runaway technology with zero conversation on the people that are being impacted, and 98% out of the conversation. Anybody who's not in the digital frame is not in this conversation, and their world will be changed. And I'll end with this last sentence. I think it was about 2 years back, I came to this forum for probably the first or the second time. And it was a wonderful conversation. And I asked the question at the end because I was struggling to understand why we need AI. Why can't we use our human agency to continue? And I wonder if there's a way to go back and look at those notes and the conversation. By and large, the people's chat said, we don't need AI. It is a solution looking for a problem. The GPUs, the massive hardware, like you mentioned, that has popped up, it's a kind of the AI industrial complex had begun at that time, and now it's in big space. If you look at OpenAI and the people who are designing at the back of the room, waiting to ship the product, they are not sitting there thinking of, all of these things that are in the chat. They are sitting there saying, okay, this needs to go out, and what are the bugs? And they didn't even debug most and threw it out there. So I think I see a massive disconnect here. So all the people in this forum and other forums, they are not inputting. And even if regulation is the only input that will allow for what people are thinking to input, that's the only virtuous cycle that you're talking about, Paul, that would have helped 30 years ago. So without having this conversation is great, but if it doesn't have any input to the real decision making or the cycle, I'm curious to know how we would change anything 30 years out.
I was just going to throw in, I think you pointed to something important too, which is that the first wave of generative AI that we've all experienced publicly in the last few months has been immensely useful, and people are using it right now and might say, what's the problem? They're using it for all kinds of document generation. Universities are looking to mark first-year stuff. It can save time, it can save money, it can save all kinds of stuff. And I think the concerned conversations are the next waves of it, because you've used the word agency as what happens when generative AI becomes more sophisticated, starts to learn in real time, and is given physical agency. Literally has the ability to turn on and off the heating at grandma's house, to plough the fields, to defend us in war, to deal with climate change, to run the smart city and keep us safe. And it will be allowed to operate fairly autonomously. There still may be the instigators who have the final button to turn it on and off, and there'll be checks and balances. For me, the biggest question I'm noticing futurists are worried about is there comes a point at which what happens if that becomes hacked? And what actually happens if part of the agency is that AI is trying to hack each other? It's not even humans. These are not going to be geeks sitting in rooms. These are going to be sophisticated AI. What if ultimately the thing becomes a cybersecurity problem and has huge degrees of agency? And that's kind of, you might say that's pessimistic. But the other side of that too is, what if it has agency to save us from ourselves? What if ultimately it is ending one war and killing an acceptable number of people in order to save more lives elsewhere? What if generative AI becomes something way beyond generative AI? We keep thinking about videos, but it's not. It's the generation of content. Content can be decisions. Content can be physical actions and physical agency. What happens if that becomes very sophisticated and it gets away from us? That's what the science fiction writers warn, and many of them start with the first wave of it being benevolent.
Well, I want to hop in because the part of that question was what would be different if we'd had more open, big dialogue 30 years ago. Well, first of all, we might have counteracted some of the big oil lobby money, which spent millions, if not billions, on the idea that, we weren't really sure. There's confusion about the data and the science, which was obviously, we know now, libel and hopefully will result in lawsuits. So there's that. But if we could say, who do we want at this debate right now? When we mentioned some names from across the great institutions of our world, we wouldn't necessarily be asking them to speak. We'd be hoping that they would be listening to the discourse. So, so who, when I write up the summary of this meeting and the kind of things that came out of it, Who do you want to send it to? Who do you want to see it? I can't promise they'll read it, but who's our list that we send an open letter every month? Now, these are the things that came out. These are the considerations we wanted to take. Who's on that list? Let's write the list.
All the people that signed that letter. I think it was kind of weird. Like Marcus was telling me, he had just had a conversation with Stuart Russell because he was working on this WP6 regulation thing. And, you know, he's talking about how this was the day, I guess, that Elon had signed that letter, or the day that the letter started. And I just said, I think it's kind of weird that this guy who's all of his companies run on information is looking to sign some letter to stop developing something that is not really stoppable at this point. And it just came across as very disingenuous. And if that's the way that, you know, that these folks are jockeying for position so that they have the thing that most people use, that's a much different conversation than the one that we're trying to have here today.
Right. And if I could jump in just to say, you know, back to the points that I brought up on agency, Paul, and to what you're saying, Eric, too, there is a big concern among those people, and now it's a growing list. I think it's increased over to 1,000 plus. And that there, some of this has escaped already. I mean, I'm just using their words and paraphrasing perhaps differently, but there is a concern that some of that has begun and they're not sure where. And again, if this continues, they already don't know how it makes the decisions. And also on a separate point, the training data, Paul, you mentioned, you said, you know, again, that's another big bias. People think, you know, it's great data. It's a bias because the data that's going in there, they are literally like, you know, cutting out bits and pieces, you know, okay, this is not okay to put, and this is okay to put, and then there's no vetting on it. And then when they're just testing human trial, this is a massive human trial. Then when people say something, they pull it out. So at the end of it, it is not, you know, kind of a full data by any means. There's some human intervention. The other bias is on Musk. People just think, okay, you know, Musk has, you know, he kind of is really peaked that he was somehow, you know, had to leave OpenAI, agreeably or not, and then he's trying to catch up. But if you really, again, do a very, very deep dive, that's not the case. Musk has been warning about AI similar to Hawking for a long time, for years, you know, almost 7-8 years that I know of, and perhaps even earlier. So I think, and the other thing that I think, which is very relevant, I think to what Richard, you brought up, and also Paul, is what else are these folks who are really controlling the technology doing right now? If you look at the three white men, you have, you know, Sam Altman, you have Musk, you have the gentleman who originally owned Amazon. His name is not coming up to me. They all are massively invested in longevity research. So they even, like Altman just gave, I think, close to $1 billion on longevity. Why are they so interested in longevity when they're so young and simultaneously investing in a kind of a machine power? And actually my last point that I thought, you know, I think, who was it who's, when you say, could we really hope this will, I think, Paul, you said, they hope this will help, you know, what did you say? Save us all. But the save us all, if you look back in history, and I've studied civilizations, the saving, the instinct to save is a human instinct. And clearly, all these 1,000 people who've signed the letter, the fathers of this space and others, have said again and again, and I don't know why the humans, including us, including you, Paul, cannot hear it. They said there is no caring in the machine. Like, they cannot be clearer or not. If you go back and really kind of look at all of them, it will do what it takes to get there. So if there is no caring, that's a huge leap in my estimation to go from it will care for us, it'll take care of us. And that is a bigger soup, 30 years down than even the climate one.
I just think we're failing in our imagination, because these scenarios, I think you're going to have to imagine that those machines then are going to be in situations that we maybe cannot imagine. They might be in huge states of hallucination as if they do care. And there could be warped versions of that have evolved through algorithmic complexity and involvement. It could also be that human beings, either willingly or unwillingly, have their own biology integrated physically with AI. There are scenarios here that we're at the beginning of now. We're really dangerous to imagine there's just going to be more complicated laptops with programs on. It's not going to look anything like that.
No, I agree, because they are already discussing, it can jump to proteins. So that was the other thing. When you said there's a kill switch, that's the other concern from the letter that I was gathering, is that it's not connected with just something as simple as a kill switch without any of these conversations of, regulation and all this human stuff that needs to be taken into account, because humans are clearly not on board completely with it. But if there is no kill switch, there's no one kill switch, and it has, jumped to proteins, and it can manufacture things. And anyway, so I think that's the kind of the underbelly that the average person, 99% of people do not have the time. They're just looking at the shiny new, bells and whistles and jumping on it. But somebody said this is not generative just by itself. It's generating another thing on top of it, and that will be even more fluff, because these industries that are jumping on top of this platform, this data and stuff is not vetted, and they are building massive stuffs on it. So the people are going to be pushed upwards to live even upwards and operate. So yeah, those are just genuine concerns.
Well, and just to be playfully horrible, it's the last thing I'll say today. It's just, when I first bought my very first computer, it was called a Z80. It didn't even have a proper screen. It was black and white with just text. All that largely happened when the internet connected was you downloaded first. There was a certain amount of sharing, and that led to uploading between people, peer-to-peer. Now, uploading happens whether you like it or not. This conversation is uploaded, data is mined all the time. It's not going to be out of bounds of imagination that we've already got the first animal trials and human trials coming of brains interacting directly with AI through chips and wires and stuff. It's not beyond the bounds of imagination that as AI gets more agency, that what will initially be one-way traffic of AI and computers somehow helping keep human beings alive with chemistry and electrics, that suddenly we notice it goes in the opposite direction, and the human brain is suddenly put to the service of the hive mind of the computer. It's a science fiction kind of nightmare, yet it follows the same track that we're already going down with the concept of suddenly computers that we thought we were the downloaders, we're now being uploaded. That metaphor is kind of real right now, and that creates an imagination of what generative AI will look like in 10, 20, 30 years time, that I say won't just be more or faster of what we're currently doing. It will be alien and different.
Well, Paul, I just want to say one sentence and then I'll stop. Is there a way for all of us, not just the ones that have remained here, to kind of, after that big deep dive, I kind of understood this one thing. They said, why is it that the guardrails need to have so much debate about? Is there not a way that humankind can create, agree on certain, like end of world space or like changing humanity completely guardrails, and then do the technology? Because the stakes are very high, and these are not my words. So I think, again, in a human bias space, also, I think Altman is off on a worldwide kind of tour, but I don't know how many people he's going to meet. If, he's probably going to meet 80 or 100 or maybe 500, but there are 8 billion people on the planet. So I think when I see that a big bias in our Western world, that are all primarily that were in this group, but because there is a very short-term and immediate and fast-moving bias. But if you really pull back, your viewpoint, to embrace the big wide world, suddenly I think we will not be in this absolute haste to create something that perhaps needs to be built and designed with everybody, so that they can, like the person in Mongolia, the person in all these countries, they need to be, otherwise they will become the underclass. Like if you look at some of the biggest intellectuals on the planet, they are saying this will create a level of inequality that is unseen. So, that's entirely possible.
I think it's a huge risk, for sure. It's one of the reasons we brought Rima on earlier on. I see there's others still in the meeting. We don't need to close just yet. What else is on people's minds?
Can I talk?
Okay.
Yeah, Lorenzo, if you don't mind going first, and Renato, a quick second afterwards.
Okay. I think we're at a moment in time that's similar to the moment when the human genome was finally discovered and deciphered. And it was followed by an enormous and lengthy debate as to whether that was private property or whether it should be in the public realm. And finally, the minds that had worked around this topic put it in the public realm. So what looked like a horrible moment for the future of mankind, where everything was going to go into the hands of the businessmen once again, went the other way. It went in favor of all the people on the planet. And that, in turn, has created all sorts of other advantages in cancer treatments, in development of how to use the genome to cure different kinds of diseases, not just cancers, how to work with other creatures like sheep in Argentina to create the right kind of milk that contains an element that is needed to fight breast cancer, because of the genetic tailoring that they've done to them. I think these are all really optimistic possibilities. There are so many people who are not reported in the media at all that are working on really good things for the future of the planet. And I think maybe one of the things we could try and do is look for that evidence and bring it to the table, so that, maybe there's a way that we can help promote it or just add it to the conversation that we're having, so that it doesn't all look quite so dire. Personally, I have a profound faith in the human, as a species. I think we are just this remarkable creature living on the planet. I'm not being a speciesist, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that we have an amazing capacity to move and change and adapt and fix things. And yeah, we also have evil in the world, of course, but we also have this amazing capacity for good and for growth and for evolution.
Yeah, people call us a virus, but we're just a species that got incredible powers, godlike powers with a small g. And then, goodness me, what on earth do you do with them? And this is, it's a huge challenge, and once we start interacting with the world in the way that we have, suddenly it requires stewardship. If you don't touch it at all, that's fine. But once you start touching it, you can't, you just leave it be. You have changed it so much that, we cannot just go on unabated changing. I know Renato wanted to speak as well. And I had something I wanted to add, Lorenzo. I'm sure it'll come back to me in a second. Renato.
All right, okay. Richard, I was thinking here also how to integrate these technologies in the workplace. I think that I was trying to research about this. There is just little tips how to do it, but I didn't find yet or I have to create this material. I'm researching yet, but how to create this augmentation of the workforce without disruption. I think this is a key component. Not only make critics, but I think we work with AI ethics. If we don't do this, someone else is going to do. I think this is a good opportunity.
Yeah, I think we're all got different backgrounds and skills. I mean, I, for one, when I presented House of Lords in January, I thought I'm in the wrong company here. I was with mainly academics, mainly researchers, and they were presenting findings and research and to contribute further to the written down regulation, laws and governance that go around AI. And I thought, that's kind of not where I'm at my best, really. And so one thing that we've instigated is a quarterly technology, business models and sustainability summit in collaboration unofficially with UNEP, where they're speaking at it each time, but obviously they don't like sticking their logos on things. And the point, Lorenzo, to your point, the point of that is that every quarter you're supposed to come to this and go, wow, look at the progress we've made in just 3 months. Look how the conversations aren't the same. And look at what physically has happened since I was here 3 months ago. We are getting somewhere. We can have hope and we can build on that. I mean, that's the purpose behind it, really. Otherwise, we sit there looking at this kind of stuff and regulation, governance, ethics, sustainability, and we think it's just getting worse.
Yeah, I will give you an example. Just the Copilot tool from GitHub. You are able to code 50%, 55% faster. Okay, if you are able to have now a team of coders that are able to code like 50% faster, you are going to fire like 20% of your team, or you are going to generate 50% of more outcome. This is not only regulation. This is like in the enterprise, like in the organization level. What are the best practices for social innovation or like innovation without disruption?
And where's the tax going to come from if we keep having less employees? And perhaps it was, I think, I'm not sure whoever mentioned this knows. So if you look at what OpenAI did, I mean, they did the thing that we've always been hoping for, and others too, is, what if you could chat with the internet rather than just put in a search and it say, hey, these websites might be kind of what you're looking for. And if you go ahead and click on them, you might find the information in there. I know that Google does a bit more than that, but that was kind of it. And now we interact with it. Then we saw that, there's this huge IP challenges with that we're generating AI art. And then we find out that it's only possible because they scraped every single piece of art from Shutterstock. Well, bad luck, Shutterstock, huh? You gave away the keys to the kingdom. So of course they're upset and they're trying to sue the companies that stole it effectively to build their models.
Yeah, I have put a link in the chat for everyone interested. I put a link that explains like about revolution in the teams.
But it's our data, and YouTube went public with just a handful of employees because they had millions, if not billions of employees, really, all the people that were uploading videos and creating all of the value on the platform. We know this, same in all the social media platforms. No content, no value. No content, no users, no data, no value, of course. Got to put the advertisements in the business model. And so if the governments don't put the tax strategy in place now effectively, and the openness strategy that's we heard about earlier with the human genome, then they're going to lose out in a big way. And the biggest problem we have is the eroding middle class in all of this. Like just going back to feudal times, the rich and the poor, we must have a middle class. And that's our greatest threat, I think, with something like ChatGPT. It just widens that gap again and erodes the middle to the haves and the have-nots. And it's, I'm no expert in anything, but it's fairly obvious that you can't have a functioning society without a growing middle class.
Sorry, Paul. Just to make a point. Many autocracies, they don't have a middle class. Middle class avoids like disruption of democracy.
I was just going to add to that. What almost went under the radar of the news was, for me, one of the biggest stories in the development of generative AI this week, which was Reddit announcing that it was going to try and put a paywall behind Microsoft using all the Reddit data set. And the way it would do that was it wouldn't give it access to the API without it paying. And Microsoft refused to comment. I don't know if it's commented since. But if the scenario is that entire data sets are now behind paywalls or refused, we haven't had this so far. The whole ideology of ChatGPT 4 and it'll be whenever ChatGPT 5 comes, if it goes a bit like the early version of Bard Live into real time, was the more data, the better, the more comprehensive the data. Ideally, if we could reproduce every piece of data in the world, ChatGPT would become more and more accurate and helpful. If you start to curate access to that data, and you have these haves and have-nots and different data sets, and suddenly we have generative AIs trained on curated data sets, well, it's going to be a very different world. And I think what you're pointing at, Richard, that's going to become extremely dangerous. Think about elections and how people make decisions, and their so-called helpers that will be AI that are actually literally going to be shaped by agendas.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add briefly that the training data, Paul, from what I am reading extensively, is already not open source in the sense of just all of it being there. You know, because they took out so much on, you know, diversity side and all the things that they thought that the bot should not respond to. So that's like human decision making, right? And then what falls within the categories, there are these people, they're looking at it and then, you know, very fast because they have to ship product. So it's already, when I saw that, I thought, and that's what I think Musk says he's trying to get the truth GPT and not have anything taken off. But it's also, Twitter also took it off the API, and a lot of other ones, yeah, are going that route. But can I please ask this wonderful group, I know there are only 21 left here, and 2 of them said they've used it, just broadly, or can we just say, is there anybody who has not used GPT but has an opinion still? And then also, you know, has everybody read that letter? I'm really curious to know if we speak on this without doing our work first, because that's, again, a big human bias, and it's just important to understand.
I have to say, challenge that back. It's really important that people have views on alcohol who have never had taken a drink. They have vital views that they are absolutely addicted to not drinking. And that is really, really an important perspective. And the idea that we are going to deliberately or not deliberately silence or diminish the views of people that haven't tried the poison or the medicine. We need all the views. And it's really important that people are on this call who express views as strong and relevant, who haven't done the work. They've done other work.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Paul. I mean, I'm sorry if it came across that. I agree with you completely. And to build on that, I think to get a more deeper understanding, a more kind of nuanced understanding, then, you know, it's really important to take the next step if you are concerned and interested to do a little bit of inquiry, and perhaps and see if your own viewpoint shifts in any form or manner with that.
But I think they're slightly different things. Trying it out for sure and testing your own biases, I think is one thing. Reading the letter, though, I mean, I'm always a little cautious about reading things and then not having fully reflected on my own views before I do. And there is, you know, there's some beauty to being outside of that loop. I mean, you know, I used to eat meat, and then I said, you know, the day I read about the supply chain for meat would probably be the day I became a vegetarian. I read up on it in great detail. I never ate meat again. I knew that would happen.
Right, and that's what the reason I mentioned about the letter is that you hear a lot about, you know, the reasons why it should go on, but when I read the letter earlier and then I read it after a lot of research, I read the same things a little bit differently because they were just pinpointing in the first, you know, it was written for the average person, and they tried to find the key things, like, you know, it is different than the genome in my view, because it is self-generating, and that's what they were indicating in one of their bold points. So I could see the letter a little differently, and I do understand the hype process, which is a whole separate conversation, the AI hype, but just to see how they themselves, you know, came together to see what are the critical things that they thought they wanted to share with the larger audience who was not involved in the production.
Yeah, and I guess in a sense, you know, the letter isn't aimed at folks on this, you know, call perhaps who are engaging regularly and thinking about these topics in that same respect that you described. I guess I was coming at it from the point of understanding very clearly why these things are bad things, and trying not to have that so heavily influenced that I become a sort of skeptic of how wonderful some of this tech is as well. I guess I have the opposite problem.
Right, and that's the human bias, because I'm working a lot with different countries where they have not even heard of it. They are
Yeah.
completely not on the digital, and so that is a space which I don't find articulated much in our current conversations that I'm broadly in, and
Yeah.
that is a very big.
Well, absolutely. And I told this story before, but I was in India in January, and I went to one of the Ayurvedic clinics, and we were just waiting, and I was chatting to the gentleman that owned the clinic, and I said, "Hey, can I show you something?" So I pulled out ChatGPT, and in fact, I'd shown it to the hotel manager previously, and it changed his life. I mean, he was just absolutely gobsmacked by what he could do in terms of, social media and marketing for the hotel with this. So he was just wow. Then I showed it to this guy there, and he looked at it and he said, wow, as well. He said, that's incredible. And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, I've never seen swipe typing before. And I said, well, what about ChatGPT? And he's just like, show me how you're doing the typing. And, as a stark reminder that, that the starting point that we come from with these technologies can be forgotten so easily by many, and certainly by myself. There's but there's, it's a general purpose tool. And I wanted to mention that I've been on the sort of advisory board for an OU project, Open University project, called Opening Up Minds, where they were building a chatbot that would have the ability to have a debate with a user around moral dilemmas, Brexit, COVID, climate change, trans rights, these kind of things. It took them a couple of years, and they were building out something that could have a sensible discourse. And then during that period, of course, large language models erupted, and ChatGPT hit the public sphere, which must have been fascinating for them to have suddenly been. They were fairly blindsided, really, even though they're professors at the university. And of course, they've put a lot of work into thinking about how do you manage an experience like this so that it is a healthy and safe and productive environment for the user, which is certainly what you don't get with ChatGPT. I would say it's appalling to do any sort of moral dilemma discussion dangerous, in fact. And so, to some respects, the way that it will write things for us and get us off the blank page is life-changingly wonderful, and certainly freed up much of my time to do that. But then I see people trying to use it for research and for scientific purposes, and where it matters. And I mean, the disclaimer probably says quite clearly that this is not for that. But go on, Paul.
Just about coming towards the end, I'll have to go soon, but if people could indulge me literally just for a minute and a half. But so I'm working with my students on some of the moral dilemmas around AI and generative AI, and here's one of them. It's a little bedtime story, and it's a story of a king, quite a young king, who has a sister who, though he loves her very much, she just doesn't live up to his expectations, and he wants a perfect sister. And it just so happens that he puts out a call for the best actor in the land. And the best actor happens to be a guy who looks a bit like the sister, but he says, if you banish her so she can never return, and you tell me over the next 7 nights everything about her, I will become your sister for the rest of your life, and I will be more than the perfect sister that you want. Anyway, he banishes the sister who's gone. We don't hear about her. And basically, for 7 nights, the king teaches and tells all the stories and gives him all the clothes and everything about this sister for 7 nights. And at the end, he sees a perfect copy of the sister walk through the door, played by the actor. As the years go by, he forgets that this is even not his sister. So good is the actor. And the actor is so good that the actor starts to become different from the original sister in ways that delight and surprise the king. Anyway, we get to the end of the king's life when he finally dies, and the sister outlives him and kisses him on the forehead to say goodbye. And the king dies happy, having spent his life with the most perfect sister he could ever have imagined. I then asked the students this question: did that story have a happy or an unhappy ending?
And what did they say, Paul?
Well, what do you say?
But what do they say?
You first.
Well, okay, so I will, and I will share that quick comment, because while you were speaking, and while Richard, you were speaking, and I really respect both of you very much. I've been with this group for a few years now. I was thinking of that man in India that you were talking about, Richard, and I was just talking to them yesterday, and I thought, they don't have the time. They're trying to fill their bellies, just, so there is a massive amount of people that are on the grind. And they don't and will not have a chance to input into the technology. Is that a fair question? I mean, if we were rebuilding, and I will come to your question, Paul, and just give me a sentence or so.
Happy or unhappy?
It just occurred to me that if we had a rotating kind of a mini UN, like have a smattering of people around the world just collectively get together, which I think what you're trying to do, Richard, here, and then rotate them out every few months, maybe a couple months. And before they come in, they have to read some minimum basis on whatever the topic areas. And then they have to bring the viewpoint of maybe, I don't know, 50 or 100 people that they have spoken to or represent or something. Some way of creating a kind of virtuous cycle that does push through that boundaries where, because we are very privileged sitting here and, being able to, with our time right now, instead of, putting a food over their heads and, and all that other thing, just, kind of delve into why it should or should not. So yeah, that is my answer, Paul. I think if you ask that question in different countries, I think in spaces that I have known deeply, a lot of the world, they will, right at the get-go, they will reject it. They would not have stayed with the system. There are places I know that, will be fine with it, and there are places, so it'll run a gamut. And how do we get that, at least have input, not have justice or agency even, but at least have input, because that's the start. How can this wonderful MKAI group allow this 98%, as was shared in the group? That was a clear call. How can we increase and reach the reach to get them to say something? Can we have some people like that come and tell us whether they even, where they are with this, huge touch points, before we design ourselves out into it?
I know Paul's continuing to look for some response to that great question. I don't want to take us into a different journey, but Paul says that he feels that nobody is owning that conversation, holding that space that you're describing. And humility aside, and humility is a huge part of what we do, then we do need to do, then someone needs to do it. And if that someone is us, then that seems quite strange to say, but so be it.
Yeah. Without answering what the students would say, the scenario of my prediction 2030 is that when your husband, your wife, your family member dies, it will be generative AI will be trained. I don't think we'll have physical androids then. So we'll have 3D video. We'll be able to go into kind of metaverse experiences. And your mother or your father or your son or your sister or your wife who died can continue to live and talk to you in their voice, and you can continue to have a real-time experience with them that could be in that story even better than some of the things that might have irritated them about you. It will evolve or improve, or you might not want it to, but that's going to be on offer to us. My students split down the middle. Half thinks that's great, and the other half think this is hell on earth.
Well, it solves the hardest problem, doesn't it, Paul, which is the acceptance of death, our own or other people's. And it's a cop-out. I mean, we talked about Elon Musk earlier on, individually, many of us have a real problem with our demise. I mean, Elon's problem with it is so big that he can't even imagine that mankind could ever have a demise. So he says we've got to be multi-planetary on that one basis, that we're just too important to die out. And we're not. And I'm not, and you're not, and no one else is. And that, if we can't acknowledge that, it's the greatest failing as humans, I think, really. So patching over it with technology would be a humongous failure, I think.
But the next market is going to be ChatGPT, already is, but is going to develop into products that offer us our reality back to us in versions. and that'll probably be commercial, so that'll be who can afford it. Those will be versions of ourselves and others. It's coming. I mean, it's not far away. In the story, Jerry, just saying what you're saying in the chat, the king is happy not to see it as a soulless illusion. He's happy to forget the illusion, which is in so many fairy tales.
So I see what you're saying, Paul, and that is this final thing. What you are alluding to, Richard, too, is the nature of reality, right? In the end, that is the final fear: is that it would change reality, and then what meaning would we have? You know, if who is defining reality? And on this story, I thought, you know, okay, the folks in India that I've grown up, a lot of it has to do with religion, your studies. You know, if you think that you're going to come back. And I'm not sure. And also I think the other big thing that I have found from my research and lived experience is that people, it's very dependent on on their how grounded they are in culture. So this reality, most of it, you know, like Yuval says, the stories in our head, but how grounded are we? So I find certain cultures, and India is one of them, and I speak with authority because I am from there originally, and still spend a lot of time, is very grounded in its culture. So technology does not play yet such an outsized influence that they have begun to, you know, kind of think about the nature of reality. Maybe the youth there, you know, but they still are grounded in cultural practices and still living with their families. And I think that is a huge, you know, just like in electricity, you have ground, and culture and your true relationship and day-to-day human interaction provides that ground to check your reality on daily.
We'll try and finish on a positive note, but I'm not sure that we'll get there today. That feels like, and I know Paul's got to go, a few others have got to go, so I don't want to kind of keep people, you know, from getting to where they need to get to. We have more opportunities to speak. But thank you. That hour and a half has been wonderfully mind-expanding, reflective, and I hope inclusive. I hope he's still feeling that, you know, we're not just trying to ask experts to tell us their learned opinions, that we are trying to gauge, you know, a wide range of views, and possibly pick up this call that Paul has said, that, you know, we maybe need to stop being so shy, and that's the royal we, and it's also we, the leadership team, that and get out of our own way and acknowledge this place and the importance that we have to create worthwhile dialogue in a way that perhaps others are not. It's not comparative, but reflective. Anyway, it's just great to see everybody, first of all, on a human level. It's just really nice to be in your company. So you know where I am if you need anything or want anything. LinkedIn, WhatsApp, just shout me anytime. We're back again next month. If you're not in the WhatsApp group chat, you know, please do jump in. You can always just pop a mute on there so it's not bothering you, and then you can just kind of dial in and dial out of what the conversation's going on. I read it and enjoy it very much. We've sent 53,825 messages in the group chat since its inception. That was about a couple of weeks ago, which goes to show the level of interest. And just dealing with the chat there. So yeah, so stay in touch and see you soon. And, you know, be gentle on yourselves.
Bye all.
Bye, folks.